You'll notice I use nothing but the best. I call it rug number 2. Steve?
My cell number in case you something you need to reach me on. So I'm going to have I can help. Thank you. Okay.
How's it going? You as well.
Oh, no, we're below, like they're below. But when it's facing us,
The 7th meeting of the 23rd Council will please come to order. All council members are present this evening. We will have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our Chief Administrative Officer, Sarita Nair.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Nair. Tonight, I would also like to welcome Peggy Gilbert to tonight's council meeting. On Mrs. Gilbert's bucket list was to attend a city council meeting, so welcome. And we want tonight's proceedings to be as civil and respectful as possible. Please do not make any personal attacks, and please no applause or other outbursts during the meeting. The meeting will go a lot smoother if we are respectful of one another. We are now under proclamations and presentations. Councilor Pena, Employee Recognition Awards for the second quarter of FY18.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to try to read these. If not, I'll pass them along to you if you don't mind, just because I'm suffering from allergies today and I've been having cough attacks. So we have 3 people who are being recognized this evening. Vicky Schwab, is she here? Linda Garza. Oh, she's over there. Oh, there's Linda. And Charlene Wicker. If you guys, yeah.
Please come to the podium. You don't have to speak, but we will recognize you this evening.
So as you guys are coming up to the podium, I just want to really thank you. You know, I've been the chair of the Water Authority for a couple years between my first term, and you know, one of the things they've done over there is recognize good employees, people that go above and beyond, and I just thought it was something that we could bring over here to the city of Albuquerque, and so you guys have been recognized by your peers, and thank you for all your work. So first person we have is Vicky Schwab. She's a senior principal accountant at Family and Community Services. She was nominated under the category of performance and innovation. Vicky has been a leader and an asset to the fiscal division and is always looking for ways to create efficiencies. For example, she took an initiative to update of fiscal monitoring forms and to provide training to her coworkers to ensure an efficient and consistent fiscal monitoring is occurring. Vicky is a great mentor to her staff and meets with her team regularly to assist, provide necessary guidance to make them successful. The quality of Vicky's work is exceptional, and she is able to respond professionally to an unanticipated situation, such as assisting the division with policy and procedures and taking the lead on implementing a process to disperse checks for the eviction prevention program to avoid fiscal agent fees. Vicky, congratulations. Did you want to say a couple of words? Just step up to the podium.
No, just thank you.
So the next person we have is Linda Garza. She is the Insurance and Benefits Specialist at Human Resources. Her category that she was nominated under was human relations. Over the past quarter, Linda has continually gone above and beyond her normal job description. At the same time, continues to be a positive influence in the division's work environment. Even being short-staffed, Linda was able to coordinate trainings, communications, and tasks with outside agencies such as the Retiree Healthcare Authority, Social Security Administration, the New Mexico Public Employee Retiree Association, all in effort to ensure the city of Albuquerque's employees' needs were completely met. Linda's genuine willingness to help others is infectious, and it is the example for our team to continuously follow her. Her excellent work ethic and helping attitude has greatly benefited our department, our division, and most importantly, the members we serve. Thank you, Linda. And do you want to say a couple of words?
I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it very much.
And And with all that going above and beyond, she actually also sits on the cruising task force that was just formed. So thank you for your volunteer service as well, Linda. Charlene Wicker, her position is Senior Affairs Recreation Assistant, and she fell under the category of safety and heroism. On Friday, December the 8th, Charlene Wicker taught the adapted aquatics class at the UNM Johnson Center Therapeutic Pool. She was substituting for a regular instructor since she was on vacation. During this class, Charlene noticed a participant, Miss Reynard, who stopped exercising and walked over to another participant. Miss Gallegos, Miss Reinhardt wrapped her arms around Miss Gallegos and began to walk her to the end of the pool. Another member came to assist her because she saw her struggling to help Miss Gallegos. At this point, Charlene noticed that Miss Gallegos was going in and out of consciousness. Charlene walked over to the side of the pool, and the ladies were at, and where the ladies were at, Miss Gallegos went fully unconscious. Charlene jumped into the pool fully clothed and took Miss Gallegos into her arms and started to talk to her. Charlene assisted Miss Gallegos until an ambulance arrived and the EMTs were ready to take over from there. Thank you, Charlene. Wow, congratulations. Did you want to say a couple of words?
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate just the recognition, not only for myself, but for the others and for everybody else that you've recognized. It's really important just to honor all of us that we've done all of the hard work. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Come up and we have an award for you.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. We are now under Economic Development, item 4. There is nothing going on in that the division this evening. We are now under item 5, Administrative Question and Answers. Councilors, are there any questions for the administration? Councilor Winter, and then Council Vice President Harris. Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like someone from planning. I guess Angelo might be the right person to talk about what's happening with the Stutz property. And Angelo, I just know you by your first name. What's your last name again?
Metzger.
Okay, Mr. Metzger, yeah. So please remind us what's going on with Stutz. I guess we've made some good progress. Can you remind us what that is? And by the way, I apologize for being such a pest to your office.
Councilor Sanchez, President Sanchez, Councilor Harris, no, that's okay. The Stutz property is actually moving forward with the demo. We're actually in a position where the bids are due on Thursday from the demo contractors, and we still are on schedule to get it demoed, hopefully the first week of April.
Okay, so hopefully that eyesore will be gone by right around April 1, more or less?
President Sanchez, Councilor Harris, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Metzger, I had one quick question. I know that we were out of funding for demolitions. Do we now have money for that? Or are we basically using some of the money that was going to be reverted back into the general fund budget?
Mr. President, David Campbell, Planning Director. We have, as you will see in the budget process, been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul on these demolitions, and we are looking for more permanent, sort of sustainable kind of ways to do that. Your recently adopted vacant and dilapidated houses report gives us some mechanisms that we're looking at to do that. So yes, we are cribbing this together to make sure we get the funding required for the immediate situations, but this is not a sustainable activity, and we'll be talking with you and your staff continually.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate this, and this goes to the administration. What I just want to ask the administration is what the process was that they used for the choice of choosing the new city attorney. Mr. Aguilar is with us tonight. The ordinance does state that the city attorney shall be selected and appointed through an open and competitive hiring process conducted by the mayor with the advice and consent of 2/3 of the entire membership of the council. And I tell you what, the city attorney is probably one of the most important positions as far as the administration and the city council, because it is a position that represents both the administration and the city council. And you know, you always have conflict between the executive and the policy-making groups, which is okay, but usually the city attorney is not involved in that because they represent both entities. And so it's really a very important position, and it's probably one of the most protected positions that we have in city government today. And so I want to talk about open and competitive because I think that's really important. And I'm not sure if to me it didn't seem like it was open and competitive, and so I'd like to get get your all's opinion on how that worked. But what I saw is there was an advertisement for the position of city attorney, and it closed November 22nd. And so when I think of open and competitive, I think of about like hiring somebody with an open date, a closed date, and then you take your applicants and you go through the applicants, and then you make a choice of who's the most competitive and the best you have. But apparently, Mr. Aguilar, then it wasn't like that. And then we see an article in the Albuquerque Journal that has a list of all the applicants, which Mr. Aguilar was not on that list. And so then we get word that, that Mr. Aguilar was appointed. And I just, when I think open and competitive, I think it's very transparent. And this is the only job, the only position in the charter besides city clerk that is like this. And so it is really important position. And in all my years of city government, I've seen it both ways. I've seen city attorneys who worked for both entities, and I've seen city attorneys who did not. And so I'm very concerned that, and we're still up for a vote, so we still have to approve by a 2/3 majority, but I just would like the administration to kind of go over the process, and maybe I'm off base, but open and competitive means something different to me, I think.
Ms. Nair?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And if my voice totally gives out, I will turn it over to Sunile. Mr. President, Councilor Winter. The position, the approach we took to the open competitive process for this position was similar to that we took for the fire chief, whom you confirmed last week, which was we did post it on the NeoGov website. We also accepted anybody who sent in a resume of their own accord, anybody who was referred to us. We basically had the door open for anybody who wanted to apply, whether they did that formally through the NeoGov process or whether they just sent an email. I think the discrepancy in the list that was posted in the Albuquerque Journal was more of a function of the timing of that IPRA request and the actual resumes we had in hand as of that date, rather than a reflection on the process itself. And with that, I'll turn it over. I'm giving out here, so I'll turn it over to Sunile for any more commentary.
Sunile, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Winter. I think Sarita summarized it well. We were able to take resumes through different mechanisms, but the key is that it was open. They knew about it, they were able to apply, and that's the process that we employed. And now I think the next step is that the council, reviews his qualifications and as part of the normal confirmation process.
Thank you for that. Mr. Melendres, and I don't know, I think that when the charter was developed, this open and I agree that when you talk about being open and competitive, there's no definition that determines what that is. But do you have an idea about what you might have thought open and competitive? And see, I think there's nothing wrong with that, but my problem is there should have been a list of everybody that applied, and this is where the competitive part, then we would have looked at that, and the best person for the job was picked on these criteria.
Mr. President, Councilor Winter, you're correct. The charter does have a heightened process for this position as compared to others. It does have that open and competitive requirement. You're also correct that that's not specifically defined in charter. It's also not defined in ordinance anywhere. It would seem that the open and competitive requirement would, in order to honor it, would minimally require notice to those in a position to receive it who are qualified, and a review of the applicants received against others to determine the best for the competition component.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Are there any other questions for the administration? Seeing none, let's go and proceed to item 6, the journal. Council Vice President Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the last council meeting's journal.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Jones to move the approval of the February 21st journal. Any questions? See none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. We are now under item 7, communications and introductions. Councilors, are there any changes to the letter of introductions?
Mr.
Councilor
President.
Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to amend the letter of introduction to refer O-1811 to the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee meeting on March 14th, 2018.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Benton. Any questions? See none, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes, those opposed, say no. That passes unanimously. We are now, Councilor Harris.
I move approval of a letter of introduction.
We have a motion and a second to approve the letter of introduction. See none? Any questions? See none, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes, those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. There are no reports of committees this evening. That is item 8. We are now also under deferrals and withdrawals. Are there any deferrals or withdrawals at this time? Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. With regard to O45, amending chapters 1 and 2 ROA to add a new article and new section respectively relating to the prioritization of fully staffing and funding the Albuquerque Police Department, requiring an independent staffing study, compensation, and recruiting competitiveness study immediately and every 5 years thereafter. I move a deferral until April 2nd.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Davis to defer item O-45 until April the 2nd. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes, those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. We are now under item 9, the consent agenda. Are there any changes to the consent agenda?
Mr. President.
Councilor Davis.
I don't want to make any changes, but I just want to recognize a few of the appointees who came in person tonight. If we can, we don't need to pull them off individually, but if I could just have a privilege to acknowledge them, I think we'd like to be able to see their faces and say thank you for
Go and proceed, Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to acknowledge a few of the folks that I saw on our list tonight who are here with us. Ms. Sandy Buffett, who's a nominee to the Joint Air Quality Board, Mr. Mark Gilboard to the Indicators Progress Commission, Mr. Tony Johnson to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, who I know is here somewhere with us, Mr. Van Overton to the Volunteer Advisory Board, and Ms. Jessie Hunt to the Indicators Progress Commission, and Mr. Jim Maddox back to the Airport Advisory Board. I know all those folks have offered their services and are expected to be approved tonight. I want to thank you all for being here in person and offering the chance and speaking to us before the meeting tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Davis, and thank you for wanting to serve. We have a motion and a, Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. Not to prolong this, but the last meeting I had removed someone's name, one of the appointees from the list, and asked to speak with her. And I must say she was very good about making an appointment with me, coming in, sitting, and answering the questions that I had. And I will, of course, support her. I appreciate that effort and our being able to find out a little more about some people. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. Councilor Borrego.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that anyone else that's on this list, please stand so that they can be also recognized if they're here tonight. So we don't overlook anyone.
What was your names? Gabriela Valles. Thank you.
Amy Miller.
Amy, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor
And I
Borrego.
just want to recognize Amy Miller. Amy and I have served together for many, many years on the School of Public Administration Advisory Board, and she worked for P&M for many years, so I just want to say hi to her.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. Those opposed say no. And we're going to shuffle the agenda around just a bit here. And we are going to item E under final actions. And that is Councilor Sanchez and Jones. That is adopting a 3/8 of 1%, 0.375 municipal hold harmless gross receipts tax. And we have also several people that are signed up to speak. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to, here authorizing, or I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. The E-018-9, adopting a 3/8 of 1% municipal hold harmless gross receipts tax.
Second. And we have several amendments. We have several people that are signed up to speak. Let's go ahead and first go to public comment, and then we will come back to the bill. I will call the first 4 speakers, and once your name has been called, if you would, please come to the front. There is seating available for you, so you can be prepared to speak. The first speaker will be Larry Sontag, followed by Leland Taylor, followed by Mr. Bartlett, followed by Berkeley Kane. And again, once your name has been called, please be prepared to speak. Mr. Sontag, welcome.
Thank you, President
And
Sanchez.
before you proceed, the time limit is 2 minutes. At 1.5 minutes, the bell will turn yellow, indicating you have 30 seconds. And at 2 minutes, the light will turn red, meaning your time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sanchez and City Councilors. I'm Larry Sontag. I'm representing the New Mexico Business Coalition. We're a statewide organization, but certainly many of our members are in the city of Albuquerque and your constituents. You're going to hear a lot tonight about the issue of the gross receipts tax, so I want to bring you a national economist perspective. We recently hosted an event in which our keynote speaker was Jonathan Williams. He's a professional economist and the co-author of a book called Rich States, Poor States. They've spent the last 10 years studying what types of public policy works for states and does not work for states, and that principles definitely apply to every level of government, including the city of Albuquerque. He talked about the first law of economics being the scarcity of resources. That refers to the basic economic problem of the gap between limited tax money resources and the theoretically limitless wants. The situation requires people, in this case you as elected officials, to make decisions about how to allocate these resources efficiently in order to satisfy the basic needs and as many of the additional wants as possible. The economist pointed out that in the states that end up doing poorly, and municipalities as well, elected officials ignore that first obligation under the scarcity of resources. The facts are that the proposed gross receipts tax would be detrimental to business growth and job creation. It'll be especially difficult on low-income households, seniors, and those on fixed incomes. If the city of Albuquerque wants to fix the financial problems, you need to look at broadening the tax base and encouraging job growth, not running away the jobs and the people that are still left in the city of Albuquerque. We encourage you to make the tough decisions, reallocate, and do not increase the gross receipts tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sontag. Leland Taylor? Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, President Sanchez and the council. One thing that is particularly disruptive about this proposed tax is that you claim it's for more police department, but if you read Section 4 of the ordinance, it goes into the general fund, which, like the $30 million Tesla bond, which was diverted to art, was a deception to the taxpayers. The other aspect to this is that the art project used money out of the vacancy fund, which now you need the money to make up. And rather than going through the direct process of rebuilding the reserves of the city, you're proposing a tax. If you can't fix it, tax it. Basically, good management would call for a complete review of the administrative and management positions. As your candidate Keller said, that he did not see a necessity of raising taxes, that there were many layers of government that could be trimmed or changed. The Rio Grande Foundation published in August of last year an evaluation of the city's fiscal standing and made a whole series of recommendations, changing the labor laws, the vacation and holiday pay schedules, paying retirements, and a variety of other options are available to the city as good management procedures rather than driving businesses, warring on seniors, veterans, and others who have fixed incomes and cannot support more cost of living increases. In addition, the damage to the businesses of the city will also create more homeless, less employment, and all the kind of problems you already have. So please reconsider the gross receipts tax.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Graham Bartlett?
Good evening,
Welcome.
President Sanchez and councilors. My name is Graham Bartlett. I'm an Albuquerque business owner. Last Friday's Journal featured the shortfall of the city budget and highlighted the need for a tax increase to cover the shortfall. The article also indicated that the biggest source of revenue shortfall is from the private sector. I would suggest to you that rather than raising taxes, it would make more sense to grow the private sector. And the best way to grow the private sector is to decrease taxes and reduce burdensome regulations. In the Southwest, our neighbors are burying us. The economic competitive outlook for our neighbors, according to ALEC, Utah is #1 in the nation. Arizona is #2. Colorado 7, Texas 10, Oklahoma 13, and New Mexico is 28. The difference is that our neighboring states have reduced taxes and made their states friendly to existing and incoming business. The business community here in Albuquerque loves this city and wants to partner with city government to make this a vibrant economic hub in the Southwest, where business can prosper and grow. If you need more income, reduce taxes, thus encouraging our citizens to buy local and allowing our companies to expand. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Burley Kane. Welcome.
Thank you. President Sanchez, members of the council, my name is Burley Kane. I stand in as the State Director for Americans for Prosperity in New Mexico, a grassroots organization statewide with 25,000 members who stand in opposition to the gross receipts tax. Most of them are in your districts. The tax is regressive. It's going to put the burden on the poorest in the city, and that is not a fair way to do this. We have known about this for quite some time. Hold harmless was first introduced as something to plan for in fiscal 2016, and that's something we all should have been looking at. And many of you, as some of you are tax and accounting people, you should know that proper planning will prevent the problem we're facing today. This will hurt the economy. Raising taxes is going to affect the businesses, it's going to affect the community, it's going to affect our ability to compete with neighboring cities. As you've seen recently, we've lowered taxes, we've seen natural wage growth, we've seen companies come back to the United States. They might come back to Albuquerque if you guys would stop raising the taxes. This is a ratcheting effect. As you raise taxes on businesses and the community, you will see more businesses leave and people leave the community, which will mean you'll have to raise more money from less people, and you'll raise taxes again and again until you run into an economy that nobody can survive. It's a contradiction. In page 2, line 17, this will be for police. Page 3, line 10, this will be used for the general fund. There are solutions, as Paul Gessing from Rio Grande Foundation has lined out for you, and I recommend that you guys look at alternates to this, take some time, do some planning, and think about the economy here in New Mexico and how you can best prosper. And all of us need economic prosperity here in New Mexico. As an economics major, I've studied the way economies work for a long time. And I urge you guys to take a second look, to do some more planning, and pull in some more ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Next 5 speakers will be Tom Valencourt, Elena Estrella, Judy Young, Wanda Umber, and Lee Amador. And I apologize if I butchered your name. Go and proceed, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm a fairly new resident of Albuquerque. I just moved here like 9 months ago. And so I looked up on your website, and the city of Albuquerque has 5,800 employees. As a former business owner, that just scratches my head, why you need so many employees. The second thing I heard about Albuquerque is you got one of the worst crime problems going. So obviously we need more police, more district attorneys, more people in the court system. So it would seem to me that the best thing to do is to reallocate where you put your employees rather than raise taxes to hire more employees. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Helena Estrella, welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name's Elena Estrella, and I'm from the beautiful and historic Singing Arrow neighborhood in Councilor Harris's district. And our goal as a neighborhood is to be a flagship of neighborhood revitalization. And we have a very active community, and we have many concerned neighbors here at the meeting here today. And I also want to thank Councilor Harris. Thank you for supporting our efforts in reducing crime and actively addressing blight in our area. And our community supports that if there is any revenue or when we are discussing tightening our belts, that we focus on the grave priorities of public safety in Albuquerque by supporting APD, supporting code enforcement, the Safe City Strike Force, and continuing with the vacant and abandoned houses. These are all things that go hand in hand in helping us reduce crime and making our communities better. And there are also private organizations like Safe Streets New Mexico, which help victims of human trafficking. And so we also request, when you're trying to figure out where we are tightening our belts, to reconsider any new projects or community centers or existing projects that haven't been started yet, that the operations of some of these projects going forward will put a further strain on the $40 million deficit. The operation of some of these facilities may be unsustainable. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Judy Young. Welcome.
Thank you. Can that be put up on the screen? Okay. And can you pass these out? Can you pass it? Thank you. Yes, if you can pass this out too.
Go ahead and proceed as they start passing out the information.
Thank you, President
Thank you.
Sanchez and councilors. I am with the Albuquerque Safe City Initiative, and this started out as a Safe City Task Force in Singing Arrow Neighborhood Association. It has been so successful because of these different areas of working with the Vacant and Abandoned House Task Force, and we thank you for that. That has really been extremely helpful, and the ONC. But what we're looking at is information is power. And so we have a lot of information that has been provided to us and that we are providing to you, you've provided to us. That information starts with providing a safe city of Albuquerque. Safety is the basis for everything of a quality life, as in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But before we can have safety, we have to have the application of the information. And so far, we have seen a decay in Albuquerque, and many of us believe that that decay is a result of not using funds wisely, and that there have been projects that have not been useful to this community, and it has wasted millions of dollars. We would like for the money, whether the taxes are raised or not, to be used wisely so that we can make Albuquerque safe through information, application, and transformation. We have made a recommendation that the Safe City Strike Force, that be increased within the city significantly, and community policing, they need to be increased significantly. But we
Thank you.
also need the city council support, so we ask for your support.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Wanda Umber, followed by Lee Amador. Welcome.
Thank you, President Sanchez, members of the council. I'm Wanda Umber, also representing the Singing Arrow Neighborhood Association. The Singing Arrow neighborhood is a diverse neighborhood, and a raise in the gross receipts tax is likely to impact negatively a number of members of our community. While raising the gross receipts tax is a quick and easy answer to some of our financial solutions, and clearly you all are trying to proactively figure out how to deal with this crisis, and we appreciate that. But we would like to partner with the City Council and really look at, in our neighborhood, evaluating the needs, exploring some public and private partnerships. Currently, we already have a private patrol that we use to supplement the fine work that APD also provides to us. We would like to evaluate the existing capital improvement projects that are in the pipeline affecting our neighborhood and really look at whether those are the best solution at the current time to meet our needs, or whether we could reinvest some of that money into existing facilities and repurpose them rather than maybe improve them, and also create operating efficiencies to thus reduce the capital improvement burden as well as the operating expense burden. We feel that those things would help us be a model neighborhood in working with the council as partners to solve the city's problem rather than expecting you to solve it on your own. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Lee Amador, followed by Philip York, followed by Maria Bautista, followed by Kathleen Burke. Welcome.
Mr. President, council people, and all the folks back here. I would like to see a 1% increase. Why are we playing around with 3/8%? There's not enough cops around. There's crime going like crazy. I hope you find your cars when you go back outside. And maybe you look for a cop then. But folks, listen, I pay a lot in taxes. I pay thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in property taxes. I have property all over Albuquerque. I've had it for years. I've been here all my life. I'm a native New Mexican. I've been in Albuquerque since 1943. I've seen the town grow and blow. You get subdivisions out there, and subdivisions here, we had a lot of vacant land. I saw somebody say the other day we only had a few pieces of vacant land. He's wrong. You know that project out there, Los Arbos, I don't know what that name of the thing is way out there. But the thing is, there goes our water, there goes our systems, sewer systems out there to some developer out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm a retired realtor, but I do believe that we have utilized the land we have and utilized the police department that we have to the best of our ability. And I think we have that now. We have to support them. If we don't, it's our fault, and it's up to us to do it. Thank you very much for allowing me this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amador. Philip York, Maria Bautista.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Philip York. In the mid-'90s, I was on what used to be called the Public Safety Advisory Board during the administration of Mayor Chavez. We heard that at that time the police force was short about 300 or 400 officers. This seems like this is a problem that has manifested itself again and again. During the mayoral campaign, I heard former councilor Wayne Johnson describe how the Bernalillo County had raised the salaries of deputies, and they were getting police officers from the city of Albuquerque. So it seems like this is a problem that's gone on and on and on, and it's unfortunate that it has to go to crisis situation. No one likes to hear that their taxes might be raised. I know that our gross receipts are down, but you know, you get what you pay for. And if in talking with the folks in my neighborhood, they say that if the money goes to the police department and to the city services, that's to an advantage. I don't think anyone likes the fact that we have a reputation now in our city that we have a high crime problem and it's not a safe place to live. That's not good. I've lived here all my life, and that's certainly not something that I like. And I don't think anyone in the city likes to hear that. I hope that if indeed we do pass a small tax, which this is, that it goes to the benefit of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria Bautista, welcome.
Hello. Hello. No, I'm fine. My name, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
All right, everybody says, Maria, speak into the mic. So tonight, I'm going to speak into the mic. My name is Maria Bautista. Welcome, Cynthia Borrego. It's nice to see you here. And welcome, Ken Keller and the new administration. Wow, have we been through a lot? No new taxes. Wait for the forensic audit. I bet you the money will be there. Cancel the art bus contract.
Please hold your applause.
The bus line is currently running curbside every single day and has not failed to pick up a passenger. We have buses. Since 2014, our ridership has declined by 25%. The city of Long Beach, California, last month found that the FTA would not approve the same buses from the same company because they did not meet code. We would save $25 million in that action alone. Secondly, I believe that every counselor who voted for the ART project should contribute in good faith their $1 million slush fund towards the deficit. Why the tax for the citizens for lack of your oversight? There would be $7 million in savings. The City Council approved the city budget on the backs of APD vacancies. Brian Colon. The art project was approved when FTA had not approved the grant or the funding was not allocated. Thank you.
Your time has expired. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Ma'am, your time has expired. Thank you.
Let me get my material, President Sanchez.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Kathleen Burke, Paul McKinney, Paul Gessing, and then David Valdez. Again, once your name has been called, please come forward and be prepared to speak. Kathleen Burke. Paul McKinney.
Thank you, President Sanchez, councilors. Godfrey Bloom stood in front of the European Parliament and said, quote, "Taxation hasn't changed much over the centuries. It's just a system where politicians and bureaucrats steal money from the people and squander it in the most disgraceful manner. This place is no exception." Might I add that the Albuquerque City Council is also no exception to that rule. It's a very short walk south of here to see this council's squandering of our money. A bus system that addresses a need that didn't exist. Now you want us to entrust you with another $55 million of our money through a 0.3% gross receipts tax. A bipartisan effort, which is disgusting, to enforce a regressive tax, or in other words, rob the poor to feed the rich. You have given tens of millions of dollars to your crony friends. More than enough has been given to Wall to cover the budget deficit. One of the partners of Western Albuquerque Land Holdings is Barclays Bank. So we're giving millions to a British bank while raising taxes on Albuquerque's poorest citizens. When you listen to the rhetoric behind this tax, it's all about APD and public safety, but as has already been noted, Section 4 on page 3, lines 10 and 11, says, quote, "Revenue from the municipal hold harmless gross receipts tax will be used for general municipal purposes," end quote. Not for public safety, but for you to waste as you wish. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Paul Gessing, followed by David Valdez. Welcome.
Thank you, Counselor. President Sanchez. My name is Paul Gessing, President of the Rio Grande Foundation. I would like to start out by reiterating and saying atta boy and gal to the ART folks who decried that. As you know, the Rio Grande Foundation very early on opposed that rapidly developing boondoggle. There are things that we can do right here to save money. This is a regressive tax increase, again, on the poorest citizens of our city. The city has seen a net decrease of jobs since October 2008. Our economy is not growing. If we could get it growing, then we would have some more tax revenue and not need to raise taxes. But it's a vicious cycle. During the campaign, Mayor Keller said, and I agreed with him, that we should be able to vote the citizens on tax increases. He also said there was plenty of fat to cut in the bureaucracy at the city. I think it's time for some kind of effort a la the Grace Commission of the 1980s and the Reagan administration, where the chairman, Peter Grace, said the commission should be bold and work like tireless bloodhounds. Don't leave any stone unturned in your search to root out government inefficiency. We need another Grace Commission for the city of Albuquerque. And lastly, as one indicator of that inefficiency in government, a few years ago, the city council had to take a vote on whether to have a switch between a Garduño's restaurant at the airport and a Los Cuates restaurant at the airport. This is the kind of management that should be done by the private sector. Someone should be contracted out to manage facilities like that, but not limited to the airport. Having that go through city council is a ridiculous waste of your time and everyone else's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, David Valdez, followed by Sean Willoughby. Welcome.
Hello. My name is David Valdez, and I am an entrepreneur and business owner in the Albuquerque area. I own and operate New Mexico Brief Relief. It's a medical cannabis or marijuana health and wellness center. And I just want to talk to you about how this gross receipt sales tax is going to affect the almost 50,000 New Mexicans that are on the cannabis program right now, with the majority of those patients here in the Albuquerque area and the majority of those pharmacies or stores here in Albuquerque. Those patients are going to be the ones that are going to suffer and have to pay this, which the majority of those patients on the program are low income also, so they are going to affect them. As I said, the majority of the stores are here in Albuquerque, so all of them travel from Santa Fe even, all these rural areas to Albuquerque to pick up their medications, and so this is just going to affect them even more so. And those numbers are growing ever so, a lot. They're just growing a lot in the last couple of years, and it is just going to affect a lot more individuals if this does go. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Sean Willoughby.
President Sanchez, Councilor, thank you for the opportunity for hearing me out tonight and the opportunity to speak before this crowd. A lot of speak of regressive tax this evening, but what's most regressive is the poor quality of service our police department gives to our poorest of residents. See, we're not taking into consideration the actual cost of crime, the hundreds of millions of dollars that we have been plagued with over the last 5 years in auto theft and home residential burglary. Some people have the ability and they can afford armed response or bars on their windows or alarm systems that indicate and give alerts on their cell phones. A lot of folks don't have that ability within our community. A lot of folks don't understand the actual crisis that we're facing is real. We have a mere 60 officers more today than we did in 1990. We have 175,000 more residents today than we did then. The whole world of policing has changed. We can't keep them in the front door. We can't keep them in the back door, and we need to invest. This is 8 years of neglect that has happened to a police department, and you really don't have very many options for those that have been paying attention. You're either going to cut services that the city needs extensively out of the budget, or you're going to find a new revenue source to fix this going forward for our deficit and for our police department. I will tell you as you vote tonight, your police department is dying. I have done everything I can for the last 5 years to shout from a mountaintop that this is a real problem. We used to have 48 officers in our schools protecting our kids. Today we have 8. We used to have 24 in narcotics. Today we have 6. We have not funnel the resources to the police department that we need, and the crime will continue to get worse. So on behalf of Albuquerque residents, on behalf of the Albuquerque Police Officers Association, please help us save this city, because we want to get back to fighting crime. We want to get back to traffic stops. We want to get back to giving this community the police department that they deserve and that they pay for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willoughby. Next speaker will be Connie Maestas, and the last speaker under this agenda item will be Elizabeth Vincelli. Welcome.
Thank you and good evening, President Sanchez and council members. My name is Connie Maestas, and I'm a resident here of Albuquerque. I'm native New Mexican, and I've lived here in Albuquerque for 20 years. I'm the mother of 2 adult children, and like many residents, I have been impacted by crime. My house has been broken into twice, and my daughter's car has been stolen before the last few years. Most recently, my house was broken into on January the 18th, and not only did they steal, like all my jewelry, but other items that were irreplaceable. And also my social security number was stolen. So they also took a spare key to my car, which I had not realized until not even 24 hours later. They came back the next day to take my car from my driveway during the day when I was home. So I would support an increase in the gross receipts tax because I think it's important that we put all options on the table to prioritize public safety. Our law enforcement needs the resources to address crime in our city. All residents of Albuquerque deserve action to tackle the challenges our city is facing, and we all deserve to feel safe here in Albuquerque. I don't know if I failed to mention that I do live in Taylor Ranch, and I've lived there for 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maestas. Last speaker, Elizabeth, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm a board member of the Southeast Heights Neighborhood Association, a member of the Habana, the Highland Business and Neighborhood Association. I'm the founder of Hub 66, which is a group of businesses in the Highland area, and we meet regularly with the Police and Communities Together team. When I first opened my law office in 1988, the gross receipts tax was 5.4325. And since that time, it has crept steadily. Today, I made a list that I have a copy for you all of how it's continued to increase. I can't see if that's working. But now it's up to 7.5%. Each time it's increased, people keep explaining that it's only temporary and that it's for a specific purpose like mental health. But nothing gets better. It just keeps getting higher. It's not fair. I pay, but you exempt businesses that want to move to New Mexico and telling them they don't have to pay gross receipts tax. And there's where you would get a lot of money from those big businesses. So why do you do that to me? My husband recently, he does video production, and he just dealt with a company from out of state that said they never heard of gross receipts and they refused to pay it. So in order to do the business with them, he had to pay the tax out of his money. Those of you who have been in business know that sometimes your only profit is 5 to 10%. So you're taking our only profit. There's no designation in this law, in this paperwork that says it's going to go for law enforcement. Tim Keller promised he would put the admin officers back on the street. You have half of the force doing admin work, not working on the street. And also, cuts are realistic, not a tax increase. I would like this left with you all.
Thank you. Go and leave that with staff. Thank you. Is there anyone else that didn't sign up to speak on this bill that would like to speak at this time? Go and proceed forward and state your name for the record. We'll allow 2 or 3 more people, because I know this is a big item tonight, and if you didn't sign up, you may have signed up under general public comments. You can go and speak now.
Yeah,
state your name for the record, please.
My name's Tom Greer. Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome.
Council. I think a lot of people signed up to talk about the GRT because I saw a lot of them on the list, but under general comments.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm a small businessman, and I'm Tom Greer. I own Hub City Brewing Company in the greater Albuquerque area in here, the only growth industry in manufacturing taking place in New Mexico. And I just finished doing my, it's kind of a personal story. I just finished doing my first year assets and liability and financial statement for myself. And I was totally blown away when I took a look at the cumulative effect of taxes, fees, and charges that I pay for. And I was going to just kind of list them. It got longer than I thought. We start out with a small brewer's permit to be able to make beer in New Mexico, and we pay excise tax then to the state on every gallon we produce, as well as excise tax to Department of Treasury, because the federal government has to get their piece as well. We pay a city alcohol server permit, a city business license, a city sign permit. We pay property taxes. I pay GRT on all the ingredients that I buy to produce beer. I pay GRT on all the sales of beer, wine, and food that I do to my consumers. I pay federal and state income tax. I pay liability insurance against people getting hurt. I pay property insurance against my property. And then I pay an additionally very large piece called alcohol liability insurance. And when I added all this up as a startup, because I'm only a year old, you know, so getting an audience together, beginning to develop a business and everything, you know, you start out pretty small and grow. And as I looked at this, I pay plus or minus 41% of my gross income in this category. And you wonder why it's hard to attract small business to New Mexico and to Albuquerque. Thank you,
sir. And I don't have a list of the next people to speak, so just kind of try to regulate yourselves. And could you please state your name, ma'am?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Nira Hitana. I'm a resident of Albuquerque. And I'd like to just amplify some comments that have been made in connection with the money that the Albuquerque city has lost over these past couple of years. For example, you approved city budgets balancing it on the backs of Albuquerque Police Department. I don't know how many times I've heard Sean Willoughby practically beg you guys to help the police department, and we haven't seen that yet. You used that money allocated for police hires and approved the art project when the FTA had not even approved the grant or appropriated the funds, and that still stands. The tax that you are proposing is not a public safety tax, it's a cover your A tax to make up for your throw of the dice. You sit here often, and meetings I've attended in the past, ignoring your constituents, and sometimes even ignoring your own people. I'd like to point out this evening during the presentations and proclamations, Trudy Jones and Pat Davis had a wonderful conversation during the entire time. And now you want to tax them, us, for your lack of fiduciary responsibility. No amount of money will boost our office's ranks until you invest in APD. And that doesn't mean just money. It means time, it means meeting with them, it means really listening to them. The next time Sean gets up here, I want him to be able to say, we have everything we need. And if fighting crime is your mandate, then use the money from the existing safety tax, or have you emptied that account as well? No new taxes. Wait for the forensic audit and let voters decide. Your competence is in question.
Thank you. Next speaker. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is no relation to Tom Valancourt, who was up here earlier. I came up here to represent me and my 12-year-old son, Lion. Oh, good evening, President Sanchez and council members. I come before you tonight as a simple tax-paying citizen of Albuquerque. One time in my life, I asked Senator Domenici and Representative Wilson, if I make $50K a year and I spend $150K a year, how long can I sustain that? The point being, you can't. As much as I appreciate the fact that we are not seeing this kind of deficit spending at the city level, We are, however, seeing a different kind of irresponsible spending here in the city. Whether it's baseball parks, our canopy coverage, art, or a myriad of other failed programs, our city finds itself in a hole every year, it seems. You all raised the GRT only a few years ago for public safety. However, our city is not safer. $500 million is gone, and now we're going to do it again. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. This is insane. Please vote no on this tax hike. Me and my 12-year-old son can't afford this. As it is, we could barely afford Little League this year, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. These are the choices I'm having to make. So if you continue to take money from us, we will literally be working just to pay for our licensing, our lacking leadership. Guys, 12 years, we've had a lot of time to fix this, and I don't mean to pick on you, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of new members. So I ask you, the city of Albuquerque, isn't it time we all did something about this? Because we can't afford this anymore, and we're not kidding. Thank you.
Thank you. Please hold your applause. Go and proceed.
Council President Sanchez, Vice President Harris, council members, good evening. My name is Alberto Ortega. I'm a 16-year veteran of the Albuquerque Fire Department and the International Association of Firefighters. I am a third-generation firefighter and have been fortunate enough to rise through the ranks to captain as my father and grandfather had. My family has a rich and deep history within the Albuquerque Fire Department with over 100 years of service combined. Our family has dedicated itself to serving the city of Albuquerque. I am currently the captain at Station 4, and I come here tonight to speak in support of 018-9 and R17-1. It's time for the Albuquerque Fire Department's operating budget, firefighters and paramedics to become a top priority for the city and for the citizens we serve. I would like to thank this council's leadership in bringing 018-9 and R17-1 for adoption tonight. This 3/8 tax increase will directly affect the Albuquerque Fire Department's operating budget from operations to staffing to equipment and training, as well as providing funding for new EMS services. Our staffing level must increase. Last year, we responded to a record of over 106,000 calls for service, making us one of the busiest departments in the country. Staffing levels are determined by call volume, which makes hiring more firefighters and paramedics a priority. Also with that, R17, firefighters' pay and restoration increase, will address the Albuquerque Fire Department's issue with retention and recruitment. This will help ensure the city's fire department will always be staffed by the best and the bravest. Your reinvestment in the city and our fire department is greatly appreciated. Thank you again.
Thank you. State your name for the record, please.
Ty Camp. Council President Sanchez, Vice President Harris, members of the City Council. My name is Ty Camp. I'm a member of AFD and the IFF Local 244. First of all, thank you for all that you've done for AFD in the past year. It hasn't gone unnoticed, all of your hard work. We really appreciate it. Specifically, thank you, Councilor Benton, for reinstating Rescue 4, for initiating that and taking the lead on that for us. As someone who drives Rescue 4 now, it's really helped with call volume, and also the citizens in that district have been helped by it as well. I'm here tonight to ask for your support in passing Council Bill R17-1 and Council Bill 018-9. In a press conference last week, Chief Dow pointed out that in terms of calls per firefighter, AFD is the busiest fire department in the country. And yet, despite this increasing call volume, the women and men of AFD are resilient and hardworking. They train tirelessly to be ready for that next call, whether it's their first or their 31st of their shift. By supporting these bills, you're partnering with AFD in two ways. First, you're empowering and equipping the women and men of AFD to prepare for and do the difficult and, yes, sometimes gruesome work of firefighting, work that keeps our friends, families, and loved ones safe. Second, you're enhancing our recruitment and retention efforts. The people who want to be firefighters are not looking for a job. They're looking for a career. These bills show that we value those who are dedicated to serving our community. In closing, we fully recognize the difficult budget issues facing the city. That's why our union leadership worked with City Council last year for a 3% wage increase that would be implemented in 2 steps. We thank you for recognizing our priorities by bringing this matter back up for consideration, and we thank you for your support.
Councilor Davis?
Ty Hudson.
Sure.
and I apologize, I don't see Chief Dow, but I know he was here earlier, and you might just be able to answer this for me. Do you know roughly what our vacancy rate at the fire department is right now?
I don't know what the vacancy rate is.
Ballpark.
It's 42.
Okay. And I realize that that's difference in budgets, and we have folks in the academy now.
Right.
But I also I know that stations like 5 and 11, for example, the stations that respond mostly to Central and in our areas, have seen some really increased call volumes. We had over 100,000 calls last year.
Yes.
11 had 60 calls per shift not long ago. 5 was right behind them. Is it safe to say that AFDs continue to see increasing calls for service, not that sort of mirror what we started to see years ago around APD?
Absolutely. That's something that's happened especially over the past 5 to 7 years. It's gone up a lot. And that's putting a burden on specifically those stations. But everyone else, when they go out of service for a call, to take a call, the other districts have to cover for them as well. So it affects the whole department.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. Next speaker. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, President Sanchez, Vice President Harris, and members of the City Council. I am Stephanie Perea. I serve as a paramedic lieutenant with the Albuquerque Fire Department. My husband is also a police officer with the Albuquerque Police Department. We have committed our lives to public safety here in Albuquerque. I stand before you this evening in strong support of adopting O18-9 and R17-1. I would like to thank the council for your leadership in bringing forth the 3/8 tax increase to be voted on tonight. This will greatly improve the crucial services throughout the city and most importantly, the operating budgets of the fire and police departments. The increased revenue will help our fire department initiate a new and improved programs to handle the advanced and basic life support calls for service. We have had a 58% increase in calls for service with virtually the same staffing level since 2004. This additional funding will help appropriately staff our fire department. I would also like to thank the council for addressing our recruitment and retention issues by honoring last year's commitment for our pay restoration initiative, which was originally 3% as identified in R17-1. At the end of the day, this will help increase our entry-level pay. It is still under $11 per hour right now, currently $10.62. Again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Councilor Borrego.
Ma'am, thank you for your comments. I wanted to know, you said you had a 58% increase in response calls?
Yes,
And
since 2004, with basically the same amount of personnel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and proceed. State your name for the record, please.
Miguel Tittman. Good evening, President Sanchez, Vice President Harris, esteemed members of the City Council. My name is Miguel Tittman. I'm a 14-year veteran of the Albuquerque Fire Department and proud member of the International Association of Firefighters. I'm currently lieutenant on Ladder 4, stationed with Rescue 4, that serves the North Valley, downtown, and everything in between. I would like to thank the council's direction and leadership in bringing forth O-18-9. This 3/8 increase ensures that we take the steps necessary to reinvest in the Albuquerque Fire Department, as well as the police department. It's imperative that we reinvest in all measures described by my brothers and sisters who previously addressed this chamber. At the core of this reinvestment is recruitment and retention of our department's most valuable resource, our firefighters. During my tenure in the Albuquerque Fire Department, I spent 3 years in the training division, including the instruction of 5 cadet classes, the 73rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, and 80th cadet classes. My experience during that tour was invaluable. During that time, we didn't really have a shortfall in staffing or recruitment. We had an abundance. Recently, our staffing has remained stagnant. 2017 being an unprecedented year where a cadet class was completely absent. This translates to no new hires, a shortfall of staffing requiring us to now play catch-up from here forth. I think you heard the number of 43 firefighters that we're short. We currently have 36 firefighters in the cadet class. Even once we graduate those, we will still be short. I would also like to thank the council for R-17-1 and their support of a restoration of pay, as previously stated. This will also be instrumental in reinvestment of the resources of these new firefighters. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Any other speakers on this item? Go ahead.
President Ken Sanchez and the rest of the council. I'm Tomas Romero with the local H&A. I'm the president for city security, the animal welfare officers, and transit security officers and parking enforcement. And we understand that taxes, a lot of people don't like taxes, but we think because of the crime wave APD is facing, that it has to be a necessity that has to take place now with the vote for tonight. I understand fire department has their issues. City security and animal welfare and the transit security officers with the ARP project advancing. We have some security officers, but they don't have the equipment probably to do their job. So we're hoping with this bill that it'll issue, maybe type tasers for some of the officers that work on those buses that can be very dangerous. Same thing with the DMD security officers that secure these buildings here. We have like 15 facilities within the city that DMD security secures. We're under the public safety umbrella as well. We're not the same category as APD and fire department, but we hope that with this money that's allocated from this tax, that the taxpayers in return get some services from the animal welfare, the city security officers, parking enforcement. Right now, animal welfare officers, I think they only have 10 officers really working in the field. I think they have like 700 calls, and I know they respond to wild dogs, dangerous dogs, and they're just really short-staffed. So our issues are the same as theirs, retention. Ours is city security. Our officers in the J series are probably the lowest paid city employees. The average wage is $13.70, and they're expected to do a somewhat dangerous job when they're out there in the public. So we understand with this bill, hopefully we can fix those wages so we can keep people in, so we can get some quality people in, we can get some better training, better equipment. And right now, vacation, they can barely get people off on DMD security to have time off only one person. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Tomas, I think Councilor Davis has a question for you.
Mr. Romero,
yes, sir.
Remind me, as we added new transit security officers in anticipation of the ART project, and some of those folks are on board, were they brought in with a different classification or different pay scale, or how was that done, or are they with your other J-Series officers?
They're the same. All the J-Series with DMD, animal welfare, parking enforcement. Right now, there's like 120 in the bargaining unit for the J12 series. Yeah. And 70% of the bargaining is at 1370. I mean, we got like 15 people that are making 1632. We got a small group of 3 or 4 officers that are making 1699. We got about 10 officers that are topped out in 1766. But our problem is with the steps, they're not progressive, so officers can't move up. Every time we go to the negotiating tables, we're fighting for 1% or 2%. And we can't fix those issues where we can get some better pay for those officers to move up. Otherwise, there's no goal to ever get into top pay. You're going to have these guys, one of these days, we're going to be at bottom pay as soon as these guys, through attrition, when they retire and stuff. We're not moving people through the ranks to keep quality people. That's our problem to be with.
And Mr. Romero, remind me now, in the last couple of years, we've added some additional duties to some of the security officers. They're more, particularly in the transit side, they're more engaged now with the community and the public, not just a stationary post. They don't have backup that's close enough to them. They're taking on new training and roles and new equipment. We bought them new vests because they were seeing new threats. Is that a fair assessment that we've asked them to take on more responsibility in the last, say, 2-3 years?
Yes, because they understand APD's short. They can't respond to every call that comes from transit or from one of our facilities, from security and the parking structures or what have you. When any problems we have at the zoo or the Tingley, they have to call police, and sometimes you could be waiting there for a while till they come. So security's asked to either, you got to do something to detain this person or stop what they're not complying with.
Yeah, it is
so
important.
it's a big issue, to be honest with you.
It is important. As we give our officers and our city employees more responsibility, we ought to be sure we're also compensating that way. And I hope that as we move forward in talking about public safety, that we forget that not everyone carries a badge and a gun, but we're talking about our firefighters and paramedics and security officers, and also folks that keep our city working well, like animal enforcement and others. So thank you very much for representing them, and thanks for bringing that to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councilor Borrego. Tomas?
Mr. Chair, members of the council, I met with Tomas Romero recently, and we discussed some of the safety issues that they've had to deal with and some of the wage disparity issues that they've also had to deal with. There was one individual who's been with the city, I don't remember, 20-some years, I think, and is earning $13 and is in building security.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have to identify that individual.
Yeah, we have a pretty good group that is in that bottom step, and they can be
anywhere from 6 months when they come off probation till 17 years in that
And-
one step.
And they have not been able to advance in
No.
the city and that is their chosen profession. I think that, you kind of think about McDonald's, and they start at what, about $9 an hour or something like that? And, these people are actually dealing with security issues, especially public safety and buses and other issues that I think we need to address. Thank you for coming today.
And now that crime is kind of rampant, you kind of want to advance security because, police is short-staffed, and if we can advance our security units where we possibly down the road, they may have to carry weapons.
I would
like
also
the
hope
schools.
that the administration would look into this disparity issue because it is serious. When people have been with the city that long and have not been able to make more than $13 an hour, and they're working full-time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tomas.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Appreciate your
Council.
time. Go and state your name for the record.
Peggy Gilbert, President Sanchez, councilors. I just wanted to add a little perspective on the amount of money that we're talking about on this 3/8%. It's 38 cents on $100 extra that we'll be paying, and we don't pay taxes on food. I just thought it might be helpful to look at the fact that it's 38 cents on $100. I think we can do that for our fire department, for our police department, and for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. This will be our last speaker.
My name is Madeline Jones, and I am a business owner here in Albuquerque, and I have been for 43 years. And I am ashamed of myself as a citizen of this city that I've sat here tonight and I have listened to the police and the fire beg for their money when they are the ones that should be at the top of your list when you do a budget. Because I'm telling you that as a business, that is the only place where you are going to get more revenue. You live and die by gross receipts, taxes. And we businesses are the ones that provide that for you. We have employees. Those employees earn money. They go out, they buy from businesses, and the businesses turn around and pay you taxes. But we need the police. We need the fire. And it is time, because this $40 million did not happen yesterday. It has been happening longer than that. And you all are the ones that are responsible for that. We elected you to be responsible for that. And you are all capable of redoing what you're doing. Make this a business-friendly city so little businesses like me can start up. If I started today, or tried to start today, the business that I did 43 years ago, I would not be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gibson, do you want to stay at the podium, please, ma'am?
No, that's okay. I just wanted to respond in part to the last speaker. And I agree with you, ma'am. We, as a city, want to do everything we can to help small businesses, startups, and businesses that have been in operation for some time. But I would like to let you know or remind you, maybe you knew this before and forgot, I don't know, but 3 years ago, the prior administration did give us a budget where there were no raises on it. And it was this council who did find the money for raises. They weren't big raises, but they were raises for both APD and fire. So I think that this council has done as good a job as we could with the funding available. There's really not been very much room. There hasn't been really any room in the budget for good raises. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. That concludes public comment. We are back on the bill, and there is going to be some proposed amendments. And I will introduce the first floor amendment to 0-18-9, and it reads, number 1 on page 3, line 1, After the term "no municipal," insert the following: hold harmless. The explanation for this amendment is a technical correction to distinguish the hold harmless gross receipts tax from a regular municipal gross receipts tax per the ordinance language required by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. I move it to pass. We have a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1 to O-18-9. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. All those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. We have a floor amendment by Councilor Davis.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
Councilor
President.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Or everyone do it. You want to go first? Mr. President, I appreciate that. I'm going to ask staff to pass out what I think we have as item C, floor amendment C. I'll read this out, and then I'll ask if the other sponsors still want to join us on this. Floor amendment, which I think will be number 2 now, to 18-9. On page 3, strike line 11 and replace it with the following. Receipts tax will be used for the purposes listed below. In fiscal years 19 and 20, which are those that begin in July of this year, no less than 60% of the tax receipts shall be used for the city's public safety budget goal priorities, and the remainder for general municipal purposes. Mr. President, what we've heard tonight from folks, and I think we agree, and we had started this conversation both from the administration and from us, and I'm happy to have this conversation here, is that although the city is, the legislature, both holdovers from all kinds of legislative decisions and a slower economy have put us in this bind, our priority is public safety. And you, Mr. President, and your co-sponsor on our other legislation have been pushing us to do that. I think we want to ensure that if we're going to pass a tax increase, that we set aside an appropriate dollars to fund our full public safety priorities first. And this would do that by ensuring that in the next 2 fiscal years, we set aside enough money to hire the police officers we need to get our public safety up to that place, and then allow the council and the mayor to come back and determine what the future budget structures would be. It also ensures that we still have the other 40% available for other things. But with, I'll come back to that. But at this point, Mr. President, I'd like to move floor amendment number 2 that sets aside 60% of the taxes for our public safety budget goal priorities.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Jones. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. And as co-sponsor of this, I'd like to say that not only is the money used just for salaries for police officers, there will be budgeted items for retention, budgeted items for promotion to go get more police officers, for training, for equipment, for everything we need to restaff our public safety officers the way we need to do it. We haven't raised taxes in the city since 2000, and we are far behind, and we admit it. We need to readjust our priorities, and this has to be number 1. It's very obvious that we need to do some work with city staffing also, but the number 1 priority, the people have spoken to us every day when we're on the streets, every day when we get phone calls, we are told public safety. I don't think there are very many people in this room who haven't been touched by some kind of, personally by some kind of crime in the city in the last few years. So I'm pleased to co-sponsor this with Councilor Davis, and I think this is a very important addition to the major bill. So thank you.
Councilor Benton, and then Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've said that I'd really like to see this be a clean bill and not have a bunch of aspirational language in here. We are facing a $40 million deficit. We do have a budget process that involves the council and the mayor, formulated by the mayor and sent down to the council and beat around quite a bit on a regular basis every time that happens with this mayor or any other. So I'm reluctant to put this language in there, but I understand and appreciate the intent. I just want to list, this is probably a very incomplete list of what I consider to be key public safety expenditures, right? So we already know police and fire, and we already heard from transit and transit security, regular city security, people that keep us safe in a public parking lot, places like that, protect our property in all sorts of ways. So we know about all those obvious public safety functions, but What about Angelo was just down here, the nuisance abatement, derelict properties, enough money for board ups. You know, these are what a lot of people would not think of as being public safety matters, but clearly are. Same thing with the homeless issue and people on the streets. The homeless is a very broad group of people that go from all sorts of circumstances, but including within the homeless problem is a public safety issue. Getting them off the streets and housed and having supportive services. And speaking of housing, just vouchers. Just getting motel vouchers to get people off of the street who may be contributing to public safety problems. Same thing with our behavioral health services, of course, that has been mentioned, and that is a key piece of it. Our senior and child programs, I mean, lighting of the streets and maintenance of the lighting, maintenance of the streets, parks maintenance. Parks have a great deal to do with public safety and are, in fact, a public safety challenge. So, I mean, I see this as being such a broad question that I worry about putting such a general statement into this. But I do fully support the tax. The state legislature gave us this authority for a reason. Most of the other cities all over this and counties have already exercised this option. The city has commendably tried to hold off on this. So we're hearing from a lot of people who are complaining about things the county has done, and there's nothing we can do about that. But there's a reason they did it, and I don't blame them for doing it. I also reject people who are saying that the county's not doing anything about with the behavioral health tax. They are, and there's good work being done on that, and that's not enough money either for that issue. But I worry about this language, but I do appreciate the intent, and I think if we could all agree that a very broad understanding of what public safety is about and everything that's connected with public safety, because, you know, Angelo Metzler is under the planning department, not under a public safety department. So, but what goes on in our neighborhoods with regard to planning and enforcement of that sort of thing is a public safety matter. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Gibson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I am respectfully in disagreement with this amendment for many of the reasons that Councilor Benton just mentioned. But I'd also like to add to that any percentage or any group, you know, like if we were going to say we want to maintain at least 20% of this for social programs, for example. That really ties our hands. And we just really don't know what's going to happen in the future. Really good example of that is something that we're going to be talking about later on today, Rio Metro and the positive train control. This is an unfunded mandate that was put to us to install positive train control, a system that's going to be really expensive, over $50 million. So, you know, we're doing it. We're going to figure out how to do that at Rio Metro. But it's going to do things that we would not have anticipated otherwise, right? And again, you know, as the councilor was saying a moment ago, that public safety can be defined very, very broadly. Addiction to treatment, I'd love to see more funding going into addiction treatment. And there really isn't that much right now, but that would, I think, go far. Effective drug abuse treatment would go far in helping lower the crime here in Albuquerque. I mean, something as simple as after-school programs. You know, that as well is a program that will help kids, kind of grow up and be in a good, safe environment and learn values that are so important later in life. So I'm very sorry. I understand the intent here, but I'm sorry I can't support it for all of those reasons. Thank you.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to respond to those counselors because I think their concerns are mine as well. And you see there are several maybe drafts that have floated around here. The reason I chose this language, or the sponsors chose this language, is because it does track our budget and it addresses some of those concerns. I think it's still important that we show that we're putting the majority of this money forward. But instead of just listing police services, we chose to prioritize the public safety priorities in the budget. And if I may, let me just read those off very quickly, because it's the way the city creates our budget in 8 different budget sections. It includes the police department. It also includes the police and public safety portions of technology and innovation. It includes that $5.2 million already assigned to the Family and Community Services Department from our previous and existing public safety taxes that takes care of prevention programs, which include after-school programs, homeless services, addiction programs, gang prevention programs, and summer programs. It includes our fire department, the new civilian police oversight department, and animal welfare work. And so the reason I think it is important that we use the language of public safety budget priorities is to be clear that we see a comprehensive, we established in the budget, that we do see a comprehensive approach for prevention and otherwise. And I think this language is incredibly important because it ensures that we fund the prevention as much as we fund the enforcement, as we have done in the past. I'm happy to come back and close with that, Mr. President, but I do want to say, if we set 60% aside, that's about $31.2 million for the estimated dollars. That increases those public safety goal budget opportunities by an overall 11%. It's a big boost for those priorities above and beyond what we're able to do for other departments. And by doing it just over 2 years, it ensures that we fully staff or fully fund those priorities to match what the public is asking us to do. And it's hard to raise taxes, but I think we're hearing that it's important here. And Mr. President, at some point when the council's done, I'd like to hear from the administration, because I understand that both our police and fire unions support this amendment as well as the administration, but I'd like to hear their input here as well.
Let's go first to Councilor Borrego, and then we'll go to the administration.
Well, why don't you go to the administration first, because I think my question's going to be a little bit more in-depth.
Who's going to be speaking on behalf of the administration? Ms. Nair?
Council President Sanchez, Councilor Davis, members of the council. I think the backstop, whether you, well, first of all, we'd just like to thank the council for considering this important issue, making these tough choices. Last week, our administration put out a 17-page budget deficit initiative report. It's available online, together with a recruitment staffing model to bring our police department up to the numbers that several staffing studies have indicated are necessary for policing a community of our size. I think the backstop, whether you pass this or not, is the math. And what the math of our memo shows is that we need $8 to $10 million a year to just staff up our police department, and that's compounding and recurring. We need about $21 million in upfront costs, so that would be the fiscal years you're talking about, 19 and 20, to technologically bring all of our first responder departments from the 1990s up all the way up into current times in terms of their technology. And we also have a number of other needs in terms of one-time and recurring expenditures that include things like Safe City Strike Force and other aspects of public safety, and especially in the treatment, prevention, homeless services, and all of those pieces that are a very important piece of public safety. So we understand sort of both sides of this debate, but we would just say that the way these numbers are going to play out in the actual budget, it's easily going to hit that number anyway. You're really kind of tying your own hands with this since you ultimately pass the budget, but we know that the budget we send down is going to follow these guidelines either way.
Thank you. Councilor Borrego?
Well, I was okay, so being the new counselor, which everyone keeps calling me, and I'd appreciate it if they wouldn't, because I've been in I've been before city council for the last 30 years. So I guess I'm trying, it's really difficult to receive these amendments sort of at the last minute. And I'd sort of appreciate if there was a way that we could get them sooner, and then we could at least have time to digest them. And I don't know how that, how our council rules would allow that, but I think it would at least give us the opportunity to understand exactly what is happening in terms of the budget. And, I basically see in terms of our city in a crisis mode. And after door knocking for the past, 8 months, I guess, last year, I heard from people, and probably over 3,500 people, that I probably knocked on their doors, and every one of them was, we're in a crisis. Since I've been elected to council, I get the real-time prompts on my phone, which allows me to see every day the police reports that are being generated across the city. And that, every day we're dealing with narcotics, we're dealing with guns, our police, they're dealing with domestic violence issues. It's just, we are in a crisis situation. And I never said that I would support a tax unless it was a crisis. And I really see that we are in a crisis. And I read those reports religiously every day. And I think to myself, these poor guys, how do they do it? How do they go home at night and sort of release what they've been throughout their day. And some of them are working 10-hour days. I know that because I've talked to them. I guess what my question is, and I appreciate the math because that's really the question that I had, was, we have this decision to make tonight, and it's a difficult decision for all of us because, excuse me for saying this, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So, public safety is number one. They are number one, and that's a basic service. And I guess my question regarding the 60% is, okay, so where does the other 40% go? Is it just goes into the general fund? And I think we need to ask that. I need to know before I vote on this amendment.
Councilor Davis?
Thank you, Mr. President. And Councilor Borrego, you're right. In doing the math here, what we see is the remainder, that other 40%, helps cover some of the other citywide costs. So the increase in health, for example, healthcare cost, eats up a good chunk of that. But every department, as we've seen in the analysis memo from the administration, every department lacking this tax is subject to some cut. And of course, the details are up to all of us to decide in the next few months over the budget process. But we recognize that every department has critical programs without being sure that other departments have access to that funding. Recurring dollars, which is what this does, are the people that do the work for us. And clearly, we have a deficit of some places where we haven't filled vacancies, and that's caused service delays. And so the answer is yes. That other 40% is allocated across the rest of the city to backfill programs that would be cut otherwise, as the mayor's office might have outlined. But I want to go back and answer that. I do think it's absolutely important. You said we shouldn't support a tax unless we're in a crisis, and I couldn't agree more. We are. But there are 660,000 people in the city of Albuquerque. Every one of us is calling 911, hoping we don't call 911 and have to wait on a police officer or a firefighter or for city security if we're in a city facility. But of those 660,000 people, only 10 of us, the 9 councilors and the mayor, have any way to change the status quo. And the public is demanding that we do this. But they're not demanding that we just create a slush fund for pet projects. They're demanding we do this to assure that we're going to build the police department and the public safety departments and allocations that we promised we would do, and that includes prevention. And we know that it will take us 2 budget years to get there. I think that's why this budget amendment is so important, because it's not just that we have new money. I think it's absolutely critical that we tell the public we heard them and we're making this their priority. And by doing and setting in law over those couple of years what the administration says is required for us to do anyway in order to achieve our public safety goals gives the public the assurance that we hear them and that we're working for them, and that we have other resources to allocate to other programs that might not directly impact public safety, but are still critical to our lives.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Borrego.
You know, I think I talked to Councilor Sanchez about this bill because I really had some consternation with it over the weekend and thought a lot about it. And you know, I did some research because you know there's other cities that are dealing with the same set of circumstances that we're dealing with. There's Indiana, there's small cities across Indiana that are dealing with the same set of issues that we're dealing with. There's Minneapolis and some bigger cities. And what I learned in reviewing a lot of that information is that I have to make a decision based on the information that I have. I've met with, you know, I've talked with the police, I've talked with the fire department, and I think that the thing, and I've also talked with the administration respectfully, thank you for that. And I've asked them some questions. I think I gave them like 8 questions or 10 questions that I had regarding the budget and specifically this issue. And I guess what I'd like to see is that, you know, for purposes of the public, because I've heard both sides tonight, it's a difficult thing. And at some point, something's going to have to give. I mean, we can't continue in this crisis. So I guess what I'm saying is that I would like to see, you know, a couple of things. I mean, I would like to see an increase in response time. I would like to see regular reports brought back to the council. And I don't know if that's 6 months or every 3 months or whatever that would be. I know 3 months is a little short, but maybe every 6 months. That gives us information back on how is this money going to be used? I mean, are we using it for what we're saying we're using it here tonight? Because that is really what the public is asking. They're asking, and I, you know, respectfully to the council, I wasn't on the council prior to this, but I realize that, you know, you can't make everyone happy all of the time. Sometimes we have to make the hard decisions. And I think that if we have that information to present back to the public, because it seems to me like that's kind of, we're lacking that, you know, is that we as counselors maybe get information back, but it doesn't always get communicated back to the public. And so those are some things that I would like to see as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. I'd like to make a couple of comments on the amendments. I am torn on these amendments. I am very concerned if we put a percentage on these amendments that the cost of public safety may be even larger than 60%, as Councilor Benton stated. I mean, you've got a broad array of what we call public safety items. So I'd hate to put 60% when we could be looking at 70, 80, 90%, or even 100%, because public safety is a priority for this community. And I just think it's important that we move forward to leave that door open. When it comes to the budget, we as a council will make that decision on the budget. The executive staff and the mayor will send down their budget, and hopefully we can come to a resolution that is fair and equitable to the citizens of our community. But I'm just very concerned if we put a specific percentage on there, the cost may be even greater than 60%. We don't have those numbers. And I would like to make sure that we have those numbers during the budget cycle when we are making that decision. Councilor Jones and Councilor.
Thank you.
And we're asking the audience to please hold your comments. When you were speaking, we listened to you, so please allow the council to give their comments.
Thank you,
Councilor
Mr.
Jones?
President, and I appreciate what you're saying. The intent of this is it is the minimum of 60% will be spent on this. Obviously, if we have need for more, we'll use more of it because this is the #1 priority. But I think the citizens, from what I've heard from people, is they want to be assured that this is going to be used for public safety. And therefore, we can't say we're going to use 100% because we might need it for something else too, but we will say that we will use a minimum of 60% for public safety issues. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is assure the public that this is not something that's going to go into the general fund and buy all new cars for the city councilors, because that's never happened so far. So I don't think that's going to happen. But we need to make sure that you understand that why we are passing this tax, if we do, and what we think our number one priority is, and that's public safety issues. Numerous. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Davis, and then Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I guess it's interesting that we're already figuring ways to spend this new tax increase money. And I just think, listen to all this, I just want to ask some questions. Do you really think raising taxes is going to fix the public safety issue? Is it possible that part of the problem is in recruiting is retention is because of having the DOJ here for maybe another 6 years?
Please hold your comments.
And the other thing, is it really going to help the DA's office to prosecute offenders? I don't think it is. Or is it going to persuade judges to keep offenders in jail? We have a great police department. They really do a good job of arresting folks and then trying to get them in the system. But raising taxes isn't going to help the judges make a decision on if they keep these folks in jail. And so I just think we need to remember that too. It might help public safety, but it's not going to help the whole problem, because it's more than that. It's more than what our police officers. It has to do with the judges. It has to do with the DA's office and having enough help to prosecute folks.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you. And I want to respond to Councilor Winter, because last year during the budget cycle, you had the foresight enough to include some budget amendments that gave the prosecutors at the district attorney's office additional staff from city resources when they couldn't do the job to keep up with our officers. And I appreciate that very much, because it's shown some results. Reminds me I need to ask the administration for that report on the rape kit backlogs, but I've seen some of the data, and we're getting hits off stuff and able to send to prosecutors that you funded. I know it's not our best answer, but the fact is our police officers do need help in other areas, and I do think we simply don't have the resources to do the prevention work without guaranteeing that we're going to spend it that way. And so thank you. I appreciate it. I know it's a hard pill to swallow. I don't have another answer. But I absolutely don't think we give an unlimited blank check to a new administration to put forward in a new budget we haven't seen yet. I think it's our job to set those goals and outline for the next couple of years that we want to achieve this problem so that we can work cooperatively within those rules.
Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with a lot of what's been said here, Councilor Benton, Councilor Winter. I mean, I think we're sending mixed messages to the public when we're asking for a public safety tax, but then we're determining that only 60% of that money should be used for public safety goals. I think it's kind of an irony, and for me, when we talk about public safety, I absolutely think that we need to support our police and our fire, but I think it's how we define public safety as a city. That's a wide array of services that we provide throughout the city, as Councilor Benton said, for the homeless, for housing, for prevention, intervention efforts. So, I can't support the amendment as stated. I agree. I think 100% needs to be used for public safety, but it's how we define that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate your comments, Councilor Pena. Just want to remind him that this is not designed to be the maximum amount we would spend. It is the minimum amount that would be allocated to public safety issues is 60%, not the maximum amount. So the door is open for projects and what we need to do to make this work as best we can. So the 60% is just a reassurance that we will be spending the majority of this guaranteed on public safety issues. Thank you.
Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So again, I'm just going to, one sentence, one question. Who decides what's public safety? The administration, the council. So what if we don't agree? Not that that ever happens. That's it. That's all I wanted to put out there again. Thank you.
Councilor Davis.
Yeah, and thanks, Councilor Gibson. You're right. I think that's precisely the reason I think that I like the language of this that says public safety priorities in the budget, because those are already defined in the budget process to ensure that the ones that collectively we've all decided are the most important and critical for public safety are prioritized first. It doesn't prevent us from spending more money on any of those programs or for additional things like the board up programs that Councilor Sanchez has been working on and Councilor Harris and I've been working on our district, and all of us have. I think that's all public safety. It's just, this is about the legal language of how we define making our budget in terms of which bucket of money we put it into the budget is all. I think collectively we all know that every one of these programs, whether it's an after-school program, early childhood program, or board-up program, has an impact on public safety. It's just this is designed to target money into the budget in a particular place that's already defined in the budget process, so we don't have to redefine it later.
Councilor Borrego.
So just for clarification, if we were to support this, it would be for 60% and 40%. If we don't support this, does the original bill require that 100% goes to public safety?
Mr. Vice President, Councilor Borrego, so the bill as written and proposed dedicates the money to general purposes. So that would include public safety, but it's not limited to public safety.
So is this bill further defining them?
So, Mr. Vice President, Councilor Borrego, this amendment would set that lower limit of 60% to be used on public safety purposes, the rest to general purposes or more public safety if that's what's needed.
So the original bill actually gives us more flexibility in if we wanted to use 100% of it for public safety.
Actually, the amendment is up to no less than 60%. So,
but I'm saying
yeah.
the original bill.
Right, it's for general purposes, so it's just not defined as minutely, I guess.
Ms. Shara, if I could follow, without this amendment, the allocation could be 10% or 20%. This simply sets a floor that says you can't spend less than that. It would allow us during the budget process to spend up to 100% on public safety if we demonstrated the need. But without this amendment, someone could come in and just spend 1% if we so chose in the budget.
Mr. President, Councilor Davis, that's correct.
Any other questions on floor amendment number 2 to O-18-9? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand and say yes. Yes. All those opposed say no. That passes on a 5-4 vote. That's floor amendment number 2. Do we have any more amendments? Councilor Pena?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is floor amendment, what would it be, still 2?
Number 3? Floor amendment number 3, correct.
Okay. This is on page 2 after line 16, insert the following. Whereas the effects of drug abuse and untreated mental health issues have caused an incredible strain on public safety and the judicial systems in our community, and this burden could be lessened if those suffering from drug abuse or mental illness are able to receive the adequate treatment before the need to engage with local law enforcement and the court system. On page 3, after line 16, insert the following. Section 6, it shall be the policy of the city to consider behavioral health and substance abuse prevention and intervention programs as a component of public safety services for the purposes of prioritizing the use of the municipal hold harmless gross receipts tax revenue. The explanation on this is this amendment would declare that it is the policy of the city to consider the provision of behavioral health and substance abuse programs as an element of public safety services.
We have a motion and a second for floor amendment number 3. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes and raise your hand. Yes? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Any other amendments? Councilors? There are no further amendments. We are back on the bill. Councilor Jones?
I think we've probably said everything and more than we need to say, and I would urge your support in this legislation.
No, that's not, we're not closing yet, Councilor Jones. Councilor Winter.
And thank you, Mr. President. I think the last tax increase we've had that I think the 2,000, am I right to say that the public safety tax went to the voters to be voted upon?
Mr. President, Councilor Winter, yes, so the public safety quarter cent tax was enacted in 2004. And I do believe that went to the voters.
Yes, if I can remember, I think it did. You know, I'm not going to support the tax increase. You know, we haven't even seen a budget yet, and we've had, the administration did a great job of looking at all the deficits, but we've had many, many years of deficits that this council's dealt with. And what usually happens is you have an administration that sends a budget, and the council can do three things. They can accept the administration's budget, they can amend it, or they can do a floor substitute. And I think the council in the past has been very good about working, tightening its belt, and doing what it needs to do. At this point, I haven't seen any belt tightening yet. And so I think it's premature for us to do this. Now, if anything, it should be sent to the voters to make that decision. But since it's here right now, I'm just not going to support it because of that. And I think that we do a really good job when it comes to budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Winter. Councilor Davis.
I just wanted, if I could, ask someone for the administration, Mr. Nair, if you still have a voice. Can you just remind us briefly, and I think again, the state law matters on this in terms of sort of the timing of how we get this passed, how we file it with the state to begin collecting. It's my understanding that were this council not to pass this and get it on the books here fairly quickly, that we could file with TRD at the legislature or with the state, we would essentially end up with a budget gap, at least for the first half of the year, because we can only begin to collect in either July or January, basically, and we have to have some public notice through the state. Can you walk us through the deadlines there and why this is critical that we do it now, and why a public vote simply would create a gap in our budget, if I understand the process right, without that new legislation, but just as it currently exists?
Council President Sanchez, Councilor Davis. So the timing on this is affected by a couple of things. And the first, as you mentioned, is the deadline for Tax and Revenue Department. You have to submit a change in your tax policy by 90 days before the date on which you want them to start collecting that tax. The only times they can start collection on a new tax are July 1 or January 1. So if the council passes this tax tonight and it goes on to be signed, then we could submit the tax to TRD. They could begin to collect on July 1st. If the process takes longer due to a special election or putting it on the ballot or any other reason, then the soonest that we could possibly submit this to Tax and Rev would be for collection beginning on January 1st of 2019. However, that would give us 5/12 of the year because we wouldn't get January either. And it would also give us the worst 5/12 of the year because we miss out on Balloon Fiesta and Christmas and Thanksgiving. So our estimates are that out of the 50-odd million that we expect that we could collect, we would only get about 20 or 25 million of that in those 5/12. We also would probably be remiss if we budgeted to receive that in the fiscal year 19, because when we send our budget down to you and you pass the budget, you don't want to be counting on revenue that is still up in the air for the voters. So there are a lot of nuances around the timing of the vote, and it could stretch out further, but the soonest that you would want to budget for this additional revenue would be fiscal year 20. And then due to some additional changes in state law, which are still sitting before the governor, it's possible that that would be pushed out to 2021 because of changes to the Local Election Act.
And Mr. President, if I could follow
Go
very
ahead, proceed.
briefly. I realize the mayor's not here, but you can help us with this very quickly. I recall that the mayor, as a state senator, voted for the Hold Harmless program because they were looking at some budget deficits at the state, and so now downstream a little bit, we're trying to resolve those here at the city. And I know there were a lot of options talked about in the campaign, but now is it my understanding that the mayor supports the tax increase as proposed tonight in order to ensure that we have the adequate funding to fund our city public safety and other priorities?
Council President Sanchez, Councilor Davis, as the mayor outlined in his interviews last week and as we pointed out in our budget deficit report, the tax is sort of the least worst option in terms of how we get the revenue that we need to close the deficit gap and how we address our city's public safety needs. I think we still see the possibility of sending this to the voters as being an option, but we would look to this council's leadership on that, and if you're willing to make the difficult decision on passing it tonight, then that would certainly be a factor in our analysis.
Thank you, Councilor Davis. Councilor Borrego?
I would like to read something to the public and to the council that one of my staff member pulled this evening, and I think it's really important. I pulled it from Wikipedia because I was trying to get as much information as possible on my position because as I mentioned earlier, I was having a lot of difficulty with this issue. As I mentioned, I'm not really in favor of taxes unless it's a crisis. So since taking over as Mayor Berry has reduced government spending by over $140 million while keeping services to the community intact and without layoffs, Berry's administration began immediately looking at ways to repair budget and through careful analysis was able to cut more than $800,000 in recurring costs from his administration. In addition, Mayor Berry has reduced the size of government by over 300 positions through attrition and vacancies. This attrition is made up partially by the 8% reduction in the city's police force, during which time the city has experienced a nationally recognized spike in violent crime, and this is dated 3/5/2018. So I just wanted to bring that to our attention because I have been following the budget over the course of time, and I think it's important to note that our police budget has been reduced substantially. So, you know, we are dealing with a situation tonight that, you know, I mean, cutting city services is an option, and it is an option for us to look at in the next budget cycle, but we're dealing with a crisis right now. And, you know, I also want to say that I read the Rio Grande Foundation's information that was submitted, and, you know, I appreciated that they did that work for us. A lot of that work is in the future, and so I guess the question that I'm posing is, how do we deal with this issue today? My business specifically was impacted as one of the persons who I rent from. There was a robbery, and that individual's throat was slashed. My neighbor's car down the street was vandalized. My other neighbor had his car stolen. So I guess, you know, we could look at things into the future, and I think it's important that we do for government efficiency, but we're also dealing with the situation right now. So I just wanted to.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, we have two converging crises before us, and that's what makes this such a tough spot that the City Council's in. We have a budget crisis, and we've had budget crises before, and we also have a public safety crisis. With regard to budget crises, the Council has never reflexively responded by raising taxes. We've responded by freezing hiring, we've responded by eliminating positions, and we've even responded by cutting employee wages and benefits. Since I've been on the Council, we've actually cut grocery taxes twice. The county's raised taxes, not the City of Albuquerque, in over a decade. And the voters have raised taxes by an initiative for the zoo. And the City Council has responded by holding back as long as we can, even though the state legislators up in Santa Fe have given speeches telling the cities that we have to do this, that we're on our own, although we've held off for years. But the problem that we are facing now is a combination of a budget crisis and a public safety crisis. And there are lots of areas we need to address to increase the number of police officers. We're talking about the DOJ, we've got to get that finished. We have to do a better job of recruitment. We've got to do a better job of morale. But everything that relates to retaining and building our police department also costs money, a lot of money. And people talk about perhaps we should cut services. People don't realize is how expensive a police officer is. A police officer right now, after probation, makes in the mid-50s. And when you add the benefits to that, and you also add the issues like laptop computers and police cars and everything else, and overtime that police officers typically make, a police officer costs almost $100,000. And if we're going to recruit more police officers and retain police officers, that number might, if anything, go up. So if you're going to cut services in order to get police officers, you're talking about firing 1 or 2 or 3 people from the Parks Department or Family Community Services or bus drivers in order to grow your police department. I mean, that's the harsh reality that we're in, and we've been in for a while. And I just wish it weren't so. And what also we have to realize is that with the public safety crisis, people view this as an emergency. I know when I was knocking door to door, that's what I heard from people, that this is a problem. This is a big problem, and we need it addressed now. And when it's an emergency, we have to act now. I would like to go to the voters and spend the next year and a half before we get the money in and explain it and have this conversation. But I'm concerned about our city. I'm concerned about being where we are on these lists. I'm concerned about our reputation. And if we don't fix that reputation, if we don't do everything we can while we have an opportunity to do that, then I'm concerned that the economic growth that people think we should be focusing on, I mean, that opportunity is going to be wasted because people who have given up on Albuquerque. And I'm not going to give up on Albuquerque. And I think this is just something that has to happen. And for that reason, I'm going to reluctantly approve this tax increase.
Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will also be voting for this, and I do, although I had a concern about the amendment, I do support in principle, as I said before, the idea that public safety's got to be the top priority. And but I wasn't kidding about that list, that partial list that I read out. I think we've got to focus on those issues first. And a couple of years of really buckling down and doing that is going to do this city good. And I agree also with Councilor Harris that it's a vicious circle, right? Councilor Winter's talking about belt tightening. We're sort of having our belt tightened for us by the state to some extent and by the bad economy. I mean, our revenue is dependent. I beg your pardon. No,
Ma'am, you're out of order. This is your first warning. This is your second warning. Would you please have her removed from the chambers? Thank you. We will ask you to leave the chambers, ma'am.
My name is Don Harris. I apologize. Yes, sir.
Yeah, time to go.
My name is Diane Gibson. I apologize for lack of oversight. Are you ready, Nira? My name is Pat Jenkins.
Ma'am, you must leave the chambers. You've been given a second warning.
If he throws me, I will fall. Are you ready to toss me? You're not, aren't you? Throw me. Nobody's throwing anybody. Thank you, officer. So, let me go.
We will take a 5-minute recess and return.
Right on. My name is Pat Flip-Flop Davis, and I apologize for my lack of oversight.
Let's go ahead and continue. I want to thank everyone that's here this evening for your patience. Let's go ahead and go back to Councilor Benton.
I lost my train of thought. I guess that was. And that's okay. No, it's not okay. So hopefully that won't happen again in the near future. But yeah, I do trust the intention of the sponsors and of the sponsors of the amendment. and of the administration and of this council that we will prioritize public safety in the broadest sense. And that we make decisions accordingly in the next two budgets. And that is on all of us. That's on the administration and on the council to do the right thing. So I agreed with what Councilor Barriga was saying about that, and we are going to have to be very focused and about how this is used. So I will support it.
Councilor Borrego.
I just wanted, one other issue that came to light while I was doing my research on this bill is the rape kits. And I talked to Sarita, our CAO, earlier and got some confirmation that those would be addressed through this tax. And I'm very concerned because there's probably 4,000 rape kits that have not been addressed. And I mean, that to me is beyond chaos and confusion in my mind, and tells me there's probably maybe 3,000 perpetrators out there or more, or people that keep going in and out of the system. And, you know, those women deserve respect, and they deserve justice. And so, you know, I think based on the information that I have researched and the people that I've spoken with, I am going to support this.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is not easy for any of us here. Nobody likes to raise taxes, and particularly absent input by during an election and giving people a chance to vote on it. And I would not be supporting this if it were not dire circumstances that we're looking at. And the other thing I want to acknowledge is the plan that the mayor's office put together, the budget deficit initiative report. And I've steered several of my constituents to this because it does a really clear background, I think, and not so much background, some background, but our current status right now. So the reality is that July 1st, when our new budget goes into effect, if we do not pass this, we're going to have to do something horrible, like give people days off without pay, or you know, cut departments so badly that they are truly ineffective. And so who wants to live without a parks department, a functioning parks department, or a DMD, or cultural? None of those. I mean, this is what makes Albuquerque the great place to live, is that we do take care of our animals. We have a good animal welfare department. You know, we have a good public works department. And I certainly don't like any of the other alternatives. So as was stated earlier, this is probably this is the best option available to us right now. Although it's painful, and as I said, nobody likes to raise taxes, but I just don't think that, you know, we have an option that is less painful. So I will be supporting this, and I would urge my colleagues on council to do the same. Also, one last thing. One last thing. I appreciate the mayor and the mayor's office for his leadership in this. You know, it's particularly difficult, I think, for someone who's just been elected to make a bold move like this. You know, of course, council has some say in that, and we're not without risk. But, you know, it really takes some intestinal fortitude to stand up and say what's right. You know, this is the right way to go. The other options are far more injurious to the city. So thank you to Mayor Keller and his staff.
Thank you. I'd like to make a few closing statements before we close on this bill this evening. Let me first begin by saying that taxes at times reveal who we are as a nation. Taxes sometimes also reveal who we are as a city. And taxes also reveal who we are as a people. And I've talked to hundreds of people and thousands of people in our community. And today, people in our community do not feel safe. Crime, by far, is the biggest priority and the biggest challenge that we are facing. I've stated that the police department today is in critical condition and on life support. And I want to commend the men and women that are out there every day fighting in the streets in our community and trying to keep our city safe and keeping communities safe with the personnel that they have today. Back in 2006, we had 1,098 sworn officers working for the Albuquerque Police Department. Today, that number is around 880. And Councilor Ben, I think, stated it best. It's not just about police officers, it's about fire and all the other departments that is inclusive of public safety. We face some major challenges, and we have cut back in the past. I have voted not once, but twice for a tax decrease of 1/8 cent each time, and many of the members of this council have done the same. That in itself, over a 10-year period, probably cost the city of Albuquerque, with that tax decrease, $380 million. The hold harmless agreement that was the state of New Mexico and the legislators gave the Albuquerque City Council the taxing authority to increase the gross receipts taxes by 3/8 of a cent. For me, this vote tonight will be one of the most difficult votes that I make as an Albuquerque City Councilor, but I truly believe that we have no other choice. You know, we need the help on the streets, and I know, looking at the plan that Mayor Keller and his team put out there, you know, I'm very pleased to see the work that they did, because I thought the different alternatives were good, but we've done that before. Mayor Berry, when he came into office, reduced the salaries of the employees by 2.3%. Are we willing to do that again? I mean, our employees have made the ultimate sacrifice for residents of our community to try to do the best that they possibly could with the resources they have had. But again, I just feel tonight's vote for myself will be one of the most important votes that I make in the 20 years that I have served in public office. But I feel that it is necessary, and we cannot afford to wait. If we wait, we could be looking 2.5, 3 years down the road for this tax increase, and public safety cannot wait. It must be done, and it must be done immediately. And I will be very hopeful that this administration and this council will work diligently to assure that it's 60+% or more that goes towards public safety. And I believe that that will be the case, because Mayor Keller has stated, and this council has stated, that public safety is our #1 priority. And I will close by asking you for your support. We have a motion and a second on the floor for O-9 as amended. All those in favor, raise your hand and say yes. Yes. Opposed? No. That carries on an 8-1 vote. If there's no further business at this time, we are going to take a dinner break. So general public comments will be heard after the dinner break. Thank you. We are back in session. Before we go to general public comments, I'm going to shuffle the agenda around just a bit. I'm going to move item C, Councilor Jones, R-9.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is authorizing the giving of notices for bids for the sale of $84,225,000 City of Albuquerque, New Mexico General Obligation, General Purpose Bonds, Series 2018A. Gonna get my script. I move approval.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Davis. We also have a floor substitute.
I do. I'd like to move the floor substitute.
We have a motion and a second for floor substitute R-9. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, those opposed say no. That carries.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move approval of the floor substitute.
We have a motion and a second of R-9 as substituted. Any questions? See none. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, those opposed say no. That carries unanimously. Okay, we are back now on general public comments. I will call the first probably 7 speakers because many of you have already left. Don Schrader. Brian Fayer, Margaret Keller, Downey X, Joel Williams, and Alberto Ortega. And Ty Camp.
I'm the only one, huh?
That's, go and state your name for the record so we can.
My name is Downey X.
Welcome.
I can't help but watch in horror as our city slides into complete anarchy. You politicians sit there fiddling with your cell phones while the city burns. You call yourselves leaders? You couldn't lead a thirsty horse to a water hole. You feel okay about giving those Hollywood perverts millions of dollars in tax breaks, but the young lady that worked at the 7-Eleven for peanuts had to go to work packing a 357 in the hopes that she makes it home alive to feed her kids. Yet Councilwoman Gibson told me one day what a tremendous job those Hollywood perverts were doing for Albuquerque. Yeah, they're doing a tremendous job of milking the taxpayers. Your ART project has turned out to be an abject failure. I stood here November the 25th of 2016 and called it like it has turned out, another ripoff of the taxpayer. Now the taxpayer is on the hook for $163 million. Do the math. That's $16,300,000 per mile, and it still isn't up and running. Barry and his goons and thugs made off with all the money. It was highway robbery, literally. It's obvious none of you have any concept of the social contract. When the gap between the haves and the have-nots becomes a chasm, chaos is the result. You can call it a crime wave because that's what we're having here. But in reality, it's a revolt. The have-nots are fed up. They're going to get theirs by whatever means necessary. Meanwhile, citizens of Albuquerque will continue to be the victims of your disgusting, pathetic leadership.
Thank you. Before we move on with general public comments, I'm going to move the agenda around one more time, and we're going to go real quickly to item D. Councilor Jones, O-5.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an ordinance accompanying R9, and this is authorizing the issuance and sale of $91,200,000 City of Albuquerque general obligation bonds consisting of $84,225,000 general purpose general obligation bonds, Series 2018, and $6,975,000 short-term general obligation bonds, Series 2018B. I'd like to move it to pass.
We have a motion and a second. We also have a floor substitute. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to move floor substitute for O5, and it's in your iPads.
We have a motion and a second to move floor substitute O5. Any questions? See none. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Those opposed say no. That carries unanimously. We're back in the bill. Councilor Jones. To
Thank you,
close.
Mr. President. I'd like to ask for your support for O5 as substituted.
We have a motion and a second for O-5 as substituted. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Camp, Stephanie Pena, Miguel Teitman, Brian Tremco, Jason Bellencourt. Go and proceed. Thank you.
I guess
State
they
your
all
name for
went
the
home.
record.
Mr. President, councilors, my name is Brian Tremco. I'm the president of Carpenters Local 407. I'm here tonight because I have a concern on bond issues and planning issues that are going up for approval tonight and at other times. And I wanted to talk about it just briefly. Generally, if a bond is issued, it means construction for us, and we usually support it. And it means construction jobs for our members and training opportunities for our apprentices. It means financial stability for families and real benefits like health care, vision care, dental, and retirement with dignity. Unlike community colleges that provide a good introduction to construction in a classroom, apprenticeship requires classroom plus on-the-job, real-time training as a major portion of the education process. When bonds are passed, or zoning is approved, or special use districts are created, or any other form of expenditures are approved, the Carpenters would like to ask that a state-certified apprenticeship requirement is attached, and it's in the proposed language. As so wonderfully argued tonight in the tax dollar debates, dollars need to be used efficiently as possible. By getting quality training accomplished as a secondary benefit on city construction projects, it's a double win for the city. That's being smart and that's being effective. That's good leadership. The economic growth of this city and county depends on having skilled craftsmen available to build everything from buildings to sewer treatment plants. And apprenticeship is the proven best method to train the next generation of skilled workers. The Carpenters believe in training, and as such, they built the $22 million training center at Comanche and I-25 that you've probably all seen. And I might add, built without tax dollars to start this process forward. We need the jobs. I asked the council to help grow the needed skilled workforce and build economic success by considering this idea and add it to any discussions where appropriate, even when considering bonds. And I want to thank you for consideration in this.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. President.
Councilor Davis.
Brian, I just want to say thank you. I think the mayor and I both had an opportunity to speak to your members and other labor folks at the labor rally not long ago, where we talked about the need to revisit that. And I know as we get into budget conversations, we want to reach back out to our trades and ask for us to look together at a comprehensive way to do that and the fiscal impact. And so we appreciate you bringing those to us. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Tom Greer, Philip York, Barbara Grothus, Peggy Norton, Paul McKinney, David Valdez.
Good evening, councilors, President Sanchez, and esteemed colleagues. I'm here to talk about water. I don't know if you know that the Supreme Court today voted 9-0 against New Mexico's water efforts to protect us in the water compact with Texas and Colorado and Mexico. 9-0. They're coming after us about how we're using our water. Councilor Sanchez and Councilor Pena received benefit of a special PAC put forward by Santalina. Nobody wants to really talk about it, but it helped your elections. You conspired together here to put Ms. Jones in charge of helping us decide who's going to be on the water board, which you've already announced you're on it tonight. And then you have this incestuous relationship with the county commission who did the same thing to put a person who got voted in with Santalina money in charge of the water board appointments. We're watching you. We do not have the water. We have had a hot, dry winter, and everyone that I know who's been out in their yard in the last few days is saying, oh my God, what are we gonna do this summer? What are we going to do? And you guys are ready to grease the wheels for Santalina to take the water out of the west side and give it to those people and deprive the rest of us. Cape Town, South Africa, is facing the end of their water supply by July 15th, and they're talking about 6.6 gallons of water per person per day. We are going to be facing the same problems. It's happening all over the world. We're watching you. We know what you're doing, and we're not going to take it. Thank you.
Next speaker, Peggy Norton, followed by Paul McKinney. Welcome.
Welcome. Our new city council. I haven't been here for a while. Good evening, President Sanchez, councilors. My name is Peggy Norton, and I'm here to support Resolution R-18-5 opposing the coyote killing contests. Albuquerque has a heart ordinance banning cruelty to animals. This includes killing animals, with a few exceptions, such as a food source. This philosophy should be carried forward to the state level. These contests do not fit the New Mexico True campaign. Calling coyotes and killing them for fun and prizes has no place in our society. All animals fulfill an ecological role. If there are problem coyotes, there are methods to use, and this legislation does nothing to avoid those. As a math teacher, a sine curve, which goes like this, describes the ebb and flow of predator-prey populations. As well, species control their own numbers. I support other arguments that have been made in support of this legislation and ask that you pass this resolution. And, since I still have a little bit of time, I think the prior administration made a lot of wasteful financial decisions. However, I do support government providing services. I support government providing quality of life projects, and I support paying for them. And so I'm glad you passed the gross receipts tax. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Paul McKinney, David Valdez, E. Ward, and Nita Day or Nita Ray.
Thank you, President Sanchez, councilors. I know, President Sanchez, I give you a pretty hard time regularly, but I'd like to say thank you for making sure that everybody got a chance to speak on the last tax bill ordinance that was just passed. That's the kind of spirit I think that we need here. And even though I don't agree with the way it went, I appreciate you allowing everybody to speak, and I would ask you to please reconsider some of the changes that were made in RA 14-1, allow people to come in here with signs and protest if they see fit. But that's for another day. There's thanks in order for Councilor Davis and Councilor Benton trying to push towards the decriminalization of marijuana, and I understand that's a very difficult issue for the city to do versus the state. I've talked to some folks about that, so thanks for sticking your neck out there and trying. And I really appreciate you guys working towards liberty where you can. We disagree on things like taxes and stuff, but at least even though you're going to tax folks more, you're trying to give people a few dollars back by not fining them because they choose a recreation that's different than some of us would choose. I don't agree with the use of marijuana, but everybody's kind of got their own choice. And I guess closing, I just say, Clarissa Pena, I look forward to hearing hopefully soon about what's going on with this cruising task force in the city. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Dr. Ward. And Nita Ray will be the last two speakers under general public comment. Welcome.
Gracias. President Sanchez, councilors. Some years ago, when I had a toe or perhaps toenail in the AI world, I learned two tenets of problem solving and artificial intelligence that well serve the real world. Diversity is good, and always cooperate. With regard to the ABC to Z project and aspects of the development approval process, community members have presented the reality of exclusion using the city's own data and words. Voices of people of color have been largely missing in the input processes. Individuals with years of relevant knowledge and expertise have at times been silenced. Interests of commercial developers have been given preferential treatment. Neighborhood concerns frequently have been minimized or dismissed in service to an artificially urgent timeline and fantasy scenarios. Over the last few decades, the level of cooperation between neighborhoods, developers, and the city has varied. When cooperation and goodwill existed, mutual agreements were reached. These agreements should be recognized and honored in letter and intent. Stripping protective language and promoting potentially harmful development while claiming things will be better for neighborhoods is not cooperation, but fabrication. Considering what we have learned about the reality of the art project, another massive city action taken despite public outcry, it is a really, really, really good idea to stop. Stop, listen, and learn. The IDO is not ready for the real world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Last speaker, Nita, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nita Day, and I'd just like to say some general comments that The planning development process and public input becomes meaningless if the public cannot rely on past agreements and decisions rendered by government bodies for future development. Particularly in matters of appeals, neighborhood associations and the public are disenfranchised when they have no way to make the council aware of
Mr.
important
President?
facts or past
Excuse me.
decisions.
Excuse me, ma'am.
I'm
The
kind of
city council
concerned.
attorney?
I'm kind of concerned that this line of discussion is treading a bit into the appeal that you're about to hear about. It is sort of framed generally, but the issues that are being touched on are relatively specific to one of the appeals that you're about to decide in an accept or reject hearing. Given that the other parties are not going to have an opportunity to make these types of comments, I think it'd be inappropriate to continue having this commentary right now.
This is a general commentary about the process of appeals. I am an attorney. I am well aware not to comment on that matter.
Okay, then keep the comments general, please, not subject to the appeal that we're going to be hearing.
The comment is about the process of the matter, that not only does it disenfranchise neighborhood associations, the same could be said for even development people as well. That maybe with this council and the new administration, we need to think of a better way that allows input for both sides at the time of an appeal coming to the body, in case we feel that something has been left out, or that way we aren't relying on any particular information flow or anything else, that both party sides could benefit if we would look at these processes and maybe consider that, such as like we had the ability to write a 350-word statement about what happened, you know, to allow each side to debrief. And really, it would also be helpful to the council, I believe, because then they could gauge, where do the parties stand? Are they that far apart? Is this decision something that is if everybody's unhappy, well, then maybe it's the sweet spot. Who knows, you know? But if both parties are saying this is this is completely out of the order, then maybe it would be good for council to hear from that in a shortened 350 statement. So I'm hopeful that with the new administration, we can look at maybe some of these processes, as well as with the IDO, to help neighborhood associations and commercial developers work more collaboratively with each other and kind of renew what I see as relationships that have become deteriorated.
Thank you, Ms. Day. That concludes general public comments. We are now under item 11. That is announcements. Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. There will be a Finance and Government Operations Committee meeting on Monday, March 12th at 5 p.m. in the Council chamber room on the 9th floor.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. Councilor Borrego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There will be a Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee meeting on Wednesday, March 14th at 5 p.m. in the Vincent E. Griego Chambers.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. We are now under item 12, which is public hearings. And the first item is item A, AC2. It's the Nob Hill Neighborhood Association appeals the zoning enforcement officer's determination. Mr. Melendez, would you please explain?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Before you proceed, Councilor Davis.
Mr. President, if I may, before we proceed, I need to recuse myself from this matter. I was involved with this matter from very early on in the process, and so I'm going to allow the council to do this without me.
Thank you, Councilor Davis. Councilor Davis has been recused on this item.
And
Councilor Pena and then Councilor Gibson.
thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to have to recuse myself as well. I actually had a meeting today, unbeknownst to me, that it was regarding this issue.
Comments, you didn't call my name.
I did, Mr. Williams, but I will let us get through this hearing, and then we'll let you speak right after. I'm going to let you speak after this hearing. Go and have a seat. We'll call you up here in a few minutes. Because I did call you up. You probably just didn't hear me. But go and have a seat, and we will call you up once we have completed this agenda item.
While they're figuring that out,
Councilor Pena?
Mr. President, actually, this isn't the one that I thought that I had to recuse myself from.
Okay, let's go ahead and proceed. Mr. Melendez?
Thank you, Mr. President, councilors. The issues in this appeal are whether or not it was filed timely. The zoning code imposes a 15-day limitations period for the filing of appeals, and second, whether or not the building permit that was permitted here is in compliance with the underlying zoning of the Nob Hill Highlands Sector Development Plan. The Land Use Hearing Officer reviewed this matter and recommends that the appeal be denied because the appellants did file too late and were outside of the 15-day limitation period imposed by the zoning code. Notwithstanding, the hearing officer did review and determine that the underlying building permit was issued in error and that it does not comply with the zoning underlying the site absent a conditional use permit. The building permit for indoor storage at this site was issued on September 25th. Appellants were aware of the approved building permit by at least October 31st when their board, the Nob Hill Neighborhood Association, authorized the appeal of this matter. However, it wasn't filed until 21 days later, and again, that time limitation is 15 days. It appears that the zoning office issued this permit for the use of customer, personal, or business services. The LUHO determined that it was more like the transfer or storage of household goods, which is a conditional use. Notwithstanding, the LUHO recommends that this appeal be denied because it was filed untimely. You won't hear from the parties tonight. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those from the record. If you accept the LUHO recommendation and findings, then we'll issue a notice of decision on this matter, and it will be final. Otherwise, the council is free to schedule this matter for a later hearing to hear more about the issues.
Are there any questions from this council? Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to accept the LUHO recommendation and findings.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Pena to accept the recommendations by the LUHO findings, and that includes the recommendations of findings. And so any questions? Councilor Benton.
Not a question, but this is rather difficult because it's pretty clear that the appeal was not timely. So for that reason, I'm probably going to support this. But it was, once again, unfortunate that early on it was not recognized by the planning department that this use required a conditional use permit. So, we hear a lot of talk about the IDO and so forth, but this is the kind of clerical error that once we get this far down the road, we've been here before, councilors, we've been here before just on somebody's little garage apartment or whatever it may be. And once those cats are out of the bag and people build something based on that kind of decision, incorrect decision, then it puts us in a very difficult situation. But given the current situation, I will support the motion.
Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to acknowledge the error that was made, and actually the correct decision was made initially by an employee over in planning who said that this particular use was conditional, was allowed as a conditional use, but not a permissive use. And then that person was overruled by her superior. And, there's no repair for that. I mean, the building is already up. We're in a really bad position here. And as well, the next appeal that we're going to be hearing, there's something sort of similar that happened there too, which gives me some concern about going forward under the new IDO, in which the planning department, including the director of planning, has much more ability to make decisions. And so I don't know how to fix that right now. I just hope that planning will exercise utmost care and caution in creating administrative decisions and in advising developers, because both of these things should not have happened. And so That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor to accept the land use hearing officer's recommendations and findings. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes, those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. We are now on AC-3, La Luz Landowners Association, Taylor Ranch Neighborhood Association, and Las Casitas del Rio Homeowners Association appeals the planning director's approval. And I will turn this over to Mr. Melendres to explain. Councilor Pena.
I need to recuse myself on this item. So.
Councilor Pena will be recused for this item. Let's go and proceed. Mr. Melendres.
Thank you, Mr. President. The issue in this appeal is whether an administrative amendment approved by the Planning Department violated the view preservation requirements of the Coors Corridor Plan. The council referred this matter to its land use hearing officer, who determined that those view preservation requirements were not violated. The subject site is the Andalusia North retail site. The original site development plan for building permit was approved for this site in 2005 after an appeal to this council that resulted in some additional conditions directing compliance with view preservation standards for that site. With respect to those view preservation standards, the land use hearing officer determined that the building heights that were permitted did not violate the view preservation standards and that the appropriate view area was still preserved. The Coors Corridor Plan requires that 50% of the view area not be obstructed by any more than 50% of the bulk or mass of the buildings at this site. A survey was submitted as part of the record here that demonstrates that the buildings obstruct only about 41% of the site, leaving 59% of the view unobscured. In other issues in this relative to the Planning Department's discretion in issuing administrative amendments, the LUHO determined that the administrative amendment was not issued in error and that it should be upheld. For those reasons, the LUHO is recommending that this matter, this appeal be denied and that the administrative amendment be upheld. We'll not be hearing from the parties tonight. If you choose to accept the LUHO recommendation and findings, then we'll issue a final notice of decision on this matter. Otherwise, you may reject it, in which case you can hear more about it at a later hearing.
Councilor Benton.
Mr. Melendres, the question I had in finding label C in your staff write-up on the LUHO finding, the trigger of a notice under prong 4. So that notice, in reading the write-up and the parts of the record, that notice was essentially was not created as a formal notice by the planning director. Rather, it was sent to one of the appellants or a previous appellant on this site as an email. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Councilor Benton, the requirement of prong 4 that you're asking about is the 4-part standard for an administrative amendment. And that fourth says that the planning director should issue notice if the planning director finds that the city or any person will be substantially aggrieved. In this particular instance, no such notice was issued. Later in the process, after the neighborhood groups had gotten sort of wind that there was something happening and changing at the site, the planning director did send an email to a couple of the participants to this appeal, specifically informing them of the administrative amendment and giving some rationale behind that. So there was no formal notice issued as part of the administrative amendment because it's within the discretion of the planning director based on a relatively subjective standard. Under the IDO, it's been referenced, notices for this type of thing will be required in every instance.
Right. So again, yeah, just to make that point, that this would be much less likely, this type of thing, to occur under the IDO, even including the fact that there is that latitude that's still provided to the planning department, or the planning director, excuse me, to make administrative decisions. There would have been more notice given, and there would have been more of an opportunity for the appellants to weigh in on this, correct?
Mr. President, yes, because the official notice with all of the rationale, et cetera, would have been issued.
So again, I think it's important to note that we weren't just twiddling our thumbs when we wrote a very complex rewrite with a lot of work by a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I agree with Councilor Benton on this. This is one of the things that, one of the reasons that the new legislation is in place. So I would make a motion to accept the Lujo recommendation and findings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Benton to accept the Lujo's recommendations and findings. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. Those opposed? No. That passes on a 7-1 vote.
I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Borrego.
I think that the planning department has a responsibility, whether it be an EPC or an administrative decision, to inform the public. And I think that those notices are in place, and it seems to me like they didn't follow through. And I think that an email is not always the best way, but I think there are other forms of notification that keeping the public informed. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and we are now in approvals. There are no approvals this evening. That's item 13. We're going to go revert back to general public comment. Mr. Williams, you can come forward and make your comments. And I apologize if you did not hear me earlier. Welcome back.
Mr. President, Council, Joe Williams, live at 11405 Central for 30 years. A real estate broker. I'm here to represent private property and property owners. How many people own property here? 2. Okay.
Mr. Williams, please address the council. Thank you.
Now, I have a register of actions here by the city, and I've got a dismissal here from the judge on these charges. So they say I'm a criminal. It says case type, criminal, location, Bernalillo Metropolitan. Okay, here's the charges. Companion animal with current animal license, no current animal license. I live in the county. I don't need a city license. Second charge, animal with no current animal license. I don't need a city license. I had 2 companion guard dogs help me guard my property in the county. I live in the county. I want the city to get their dog pound to leave me alone. I've never had any problems with the Bernalillo County dog pound, but the city across the street from me is constantly harassing me, coming on my property and trapping my dogs, putting them in the shelters, breaking their legs. And the judge did dismiss this. I've got evidence right here in my hand. Order dismissing criminal complaint. Judge Dominguez. I want those things off my record. I don't want a cop to look at a rap sheet. Look there.
Mr. Williams?
Criminal charges.
Again, your time has expired, so I apologize. Thank you for coming down this evening and waiting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go back to final actions. Item B, Councilor Gibson, O-4.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. O-4 is amending sections 2-6-12-1 through 2-6-12-6, ROA 1994, the Early Head Start Program Governance Advisory Committee, to change the requirements of the Program Governance Advisory Committee. I'm going to move a due pass on this. The reason this is needed is they need to have a quorum in order to have meetings, so we've made adjustments so that they may be able to continue to meet and make decisions. So we've lowered the requirement for membership.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Counselor Jones for O-4. Are there any questions? Counselor Davis.
Very briefly, and Councilor Gibson, thank you for bringing this. I support it. I just want to raise the issue really quickly with the administration to help us just a little bit. This is a problem we've had for years. I know Councilor Gibson and I have been on these calls with our federal grant administrators and our staff. Ms. Taylor, wherever she is at the moment, has sat in on these. I mean, it's been an ongoing issue for us to demonstrate not only that we're living up to the funding requirements to recruit the number of students that we are paid, and we certainly have the need in the city, but also to recruit the members, and particularly parents and participants, to be active members with us. It's a critical grant. It's one we are in danger of losing if we don't comply here. I know your administration's been watching and working with us to try to get us back on track. But Councilor Gibson, this is a great way to recruit some new folks and help us bring some life back to that board. But I just want to flag for the administration how important it is that we get this right here in the next couple of months so that we are eligible not to, or we don't end up losing these funds like we have some of other CDBG and HUD dollars in the past for failure to comply. So I did want to flag that for our administration and hope we can work together on it.
Thank you, Counselor Davis. Counselor Gibson to close.
Thank you, and thank you, Counselor Davis, for that. We are at risk of losing funding for that. I'm very sorry to say, because you're right, the need and the demand has not gone away. But I'm hoping that new leadership in family will give this a priority and work on this program and save it. So I urge your support.
We have a motion and a second for approval of O-4. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes, those opposed say no. That carries unanimously. We've already taken care of item C on the agenda. We have taken care of item D on the agenda. We are now under item F. Myself and Councilor Harris are sponsoring this bill. That is R-1. That is adjusting fiscal year 2018 general fund appropriations and programs to provide for employee wage increases for the fire union employees equivalent to 1.5% and adjusting fiscal year 2018 capital appropriations. And we also have a floor substitute by Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move floor substitute to R-17-1. This is the one that we had in the packet for this weekend, and I realize that this will also would require us to defer, but this would utilize the funding source that was proposed in the original bill to keep it in capital, to keep it as a capital line item, and to keep it for and to utilize it for affordable housing. And we talked about some of the needs of within public safety that includes some of the work that's being done with behavioral health is focused on single site facilities and on other kind of supportive housing. I know Councilor Gibson and Commissioner O'Malley are working on a tiny home version of this, but all of these types of supportive housing are critical to the public safety. And I feel like it's very important that we maintain our capital abilities with regard to these efforts. We're already working, and with the tax that was just passed, we would be working on the kind of the human side and the programmatic side of these efforts, but that doesn't do anything for the capital. So since this was original capital construction when it was originally created as part of ABQ, the plan, it seemed appropriate to me that it be maintaining capital and that it be in a critical public safety area like supportive housing. So that's what floor substitute is for, so I'll move the substitution.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Gibson for floor substitute to R-1. Any other questions? Councilor Davis.
Mr. President, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear from the firefighter union briefly. I know this is a bill about our public safety and fulfilling our commitments to them. I know Mr. Aaron Cohn is here, President of IAFF, to help just give us some brief background on where we came here And I have a quick question about how, whether this amendment or another potential floor sub or others might impact some negotiation on contract obligations.
Mr. Alarcon?
Good evening, President Sanchez, members of the council. Just a brief statement on this is, we originally introduced this with your help and Councilor Harris in December as a FY18 markup initiative. This was left over from an agreement with council at a 3% pay increase that we agreed to with the administration. Budget was rough. Myself and my members stepped up in negotiations and decided to split it for concerns that everyone shared over the budget and the fiscal situation of the city. Basically, this is just a markup initiative that we're following through on. And my fear with this amendment, respectfully, Councilor Benton, is that if we push this into FY19, that's going to affect the subject to bargaining clause. Right now, our bargaining agreement contains the language that the parties agree that they will accept whatever council appropriates in FY18. We specifically negotiated that language for this reason. How it's come to this far, and what are we in March? That's just because of the language in the bill that was drafted is not ideal, but I think we appeased the concerns of those with YDI and others in our amendment to FGO, which took those programs and their value and considered them, and will futuristically consider them a priority in FY19. We were somewhat satisfied along with the sponsors with that, and basically that's where we came to today. So my fear is if we push this into an FY19, this is going to interfere with the future negotiations as our contract expires now in April.
Any questions? Councilor Davis?
I just want to follow and say thank you. I want to be clear, we're not asking about, we're not trying to negotiate from the dais here, but I did want to understand what our timelines were and why this was how we got here in a budget situation as fulfilling the end of last year's budget commitments where we had the opportunity. So thank you for bringing that to us. I think it's important that we fulfill our commitments to our city employees as well. And so I think it's important that we continue to do this so that we can start the new year strong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Gibson?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think we all remember what happened last budget. It was awful. It was a tough budget to go through, but the sort of oral agreement was that if the GRT tracked at 3%, that we would revisit another raise increase for fire. And it hasn't. In fact, it's more like 1.7%, which is helped make the difference of the 25 million in structural deficit. So, you know, we didn't collect 1.5 at the beginning of the year, the first 6 months. We collected far less than that. So to me, you know, remembering very well what happened, I'm sure everyone else in this room remembers very well what happened last spring, because we did not meet what we hoped to meet. The 1.5% shouldn't even be, you know, on the table right now. So, you know, we're going to be going into a new budget, looking forward to fiscal year 19, and hopefully we'll be able to get decent raises for fire, as well as APD and other employees with the city. But, you know, I'm really sorry to have to say this, tell you this twice, once in committee and once here, but I think it needs to be said, you know, that had we tracked at 3%, or at least 1.5, for the first 6 months of the budget, I would, you know, happily look at an increase for fire. But that simply has not happened. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. We have a motion and a second on the floor, a floor substitute to R-1. All those in favor signify by saying yes and raise your hand. Yes. Those opposed say no. No. That fails on a 5-2 vote. And I've got a floor substitute. I'm not going to move forward. I'm going to move forward with the bill as presented. Basically, I think that we have worked very closely with the fire department on this 1.5% increase. I know initially when they came to us, they were asking for a 3% increase. And at that time, we told them we just did not have the resources. We would be willing to give you the 1.5% at that time and try to find a 1.5% down the road. I was very concerned with the initial legislation that was introduced because it was going after some of the nonprofits. We have put a provision in that legislation with an amendment that I believe protects those nonprofits and making it a priority this next budget cycle if they don't lose their money. So I would like to just move forward with this, with R1 as proposed. Second. We have a motion and a second by Councilor Borrego. Any questions? See none. All those in favor, raise your hand and say yes. Yes. Those opposed say no. That passes on a 4-3 vote. Okay. We are now under item G. Councilor Gibson Borrego, R-5.
Okay, well, let me just start this.
Councilor Gibson, then we'll go over to Councilor Borrego. We've got dual sponsors.
President Sanchez, I'm sorry. Can we clarify the vote on that last bill, please?
Okay, let's go and re-vote on R-1. All those in favor, raise your hand and say yes. That's 4. Those opposed? That's 4. So it dies on a 4-4 vote. My apologies.
Okay, let's see, this next bill, R5, is condemning animal abuse in the form of coyote killing contests and urging New Mexico legislature to pass legislation prohibiting contests organized, arranged, or sponsored for the purpose of killing coyotes for prizes or entertainment. I'm going to move a do pass. And we think we have some folks signed up to speak.
Okay, the first speaker will be Tom Berkeley. Ellen Edwards will be the next speaker.
Oh, okay.
Nancy Savage will follow, followed by David Parsons.
Who is the first?
Tom Buckley. Thank you for your patience in waiting this evening. Go and proceed.
Thank you, President Sanchez and County Commissioners. My name is Tom Buckley, B-U-C-K-L-E-Y, and I'm going to keep this relatively short. We're not asking you for any money today. I'm speaking as a private citizen. I'm not representing anybody else but myself, and I am District 5. Thank you. Just look at the title on this thing. Coyote killing contests. This is 2018. We're in the 21st century. And we're talking about a killing contest of a wild animal who, as far as I know, hasn't done any personal harm to anybody in this room. Certainly not to myself. As was mentioned by a previous person, if there's a problem with a particular animal, a particular coyote, there are systems in place right now to deal with that. And we have very competent people that can fulfill that need. But a killing contest, a slaughter of a wild species, are we really considering allowing that to happen this day and age? It's not an activity that a civilized society partakes in. It's not consistent with the example that we should be presenting to the rest of the country or the rest of the world. It's not what New Mexico should be known for, allowing this sort of savage activity. Again, this is not a request for any funds, and I know you guys are not voting on legislation right now, but simply going to pass on to the state legislature what your belief is. And I ask you please to support R 18.5. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Borrego.
Sir, I want to thank you for taking the
Buckley?
time to come, sir. Mine too. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to drive down here and make your statements. And I also want to salute you for your service to our country. My father was in World War II, and I see that you're wearing your Vietnam veteran's hat, and thank you so much for your service. And
Thank you very much.
Our
And
freedom.
again, thank you all for the time.
Thank you. Helen Edmonds, Nancy Savage, and David Parsons. Welcome.
President Sanchez, members of the council. I'm Alan Edmonds. I'm cruelty case manager at Animal Protection of New Mexico. Also work for Animal Protection Voters. We're a statewide animal advocacy group. We create systemic change for the protection of animals in New Mexico, and we've been a leading voice in the roundhouse to ban coyote killing contests statewide, as is noted on page 2 of the bill. We'd like to thank Councilors Borrego and Gibson for sponsoring this resolution. And on behalf of our more than 2,000 Albuquerque supporters, we would like to urge you to vote yes on the resolution opposing coyote killing contests. The coyote killing contests in New Mexico, including the ones promoted locally here in Albuquerque, damage our community's reputation and offend our community's sense of common decency. Killing contests violate traditional conservational hunting ethics and are ineffective at managing coyote populations. Killing contest participants are only in it for what kind of twisted gratification they can experience by killing these animals. That's why, according to a December 2016 poll, New Mexico voters opposed coyote killing contests by more than a 2-to-1 margin. So please support this resolution on behalf of your fellow Albuquerque residents and send a strong message that senseless killing of our state's wildlife is not who we are as a city and as New Mexicans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nancy Savage, followed by David Parsons, followed by Fred Hodak. Welcome.
Thank you. President Sanchez and councilors, I'm Nancy Savage, and I rise in support of R 18.5, condemning animal abuse in the form of coyote killing contests. I moved to New Mexico in 1958 when I was just a little girl, and I grew up in Las Cruces, and I worked for 26 years as a mathematician, computer scientist for the Department of Army. I was the proverbial rocket scientist. Now, we no longer live in the 1800s, where people thought that animals were just to be exterminated and killed off because they were a nuisance to a few of us. We're living in the 2000s, as Mr. Buckley pointed out, the 21st century, where we understand the value of wildlife, the value of them intrinsically in nature, in our world. And this is based on science and the understanding that they have a right to exist on our planet. So I urge you to vote for this resolution banning this cruel, inhumane, and bloodlust sport. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. David Parsons.
Thank you, President Sanchez, councilors. My name is David Parsons. I'm a career wildlife biologist specializing in carnivore conservation, and I serve on the Science Advisory Board of Project Coyote, a national nonprofit organization that promotes science-based coexistence between humans and wild carnivores, especially coyotes. In 2015 and 2017, I served as the expert witness for Senate and House sponsors of legislation to outlaw coyote killing contests in New Mexico. Many respected wildlife experts agree that there is no scientific justification for coyote killing contests and no proven wildlife management benefit. I sent you all a letter that was developed for the state legislation, signed by about 30 respected wildlife scientists that laid out the science that in support of ending this practice. The concept that these contests are antithetical to modern wildlife governance principles, and it's well past time to end this unethical practice. So I urge you to please support R 18.5. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Hodek, followed by Brian Hoover, and the last speaker will be Peggy Norton.
President Sanchez and councilors. My name is Fred Hodek. I'm in Councilor Winter's district, and I am the chairman of the central group of the Sierra Club Rio Grande chapter. I'm here to, number one, agree with everything that's been said already about the resolution. And we recognize that it was pointed out the last time I spoke before you about this when Councilor Gibson brought the resolution to fore, that it's not a resolution that is going to stop and there are already rules both in the county and the city that would require the actual killing of the coyotes in such a contest. What is important, and the only point that I really want to make, and a statistic that I heard this evening in the prior part of the meeting, was that Albuquerque has 660,000 residents and citizens. That, in my mind, and I think some of you know that I'm relatively new to Albuquerque. I've only been here about 4 years, but that's the first time I really realized the size of the population of the city, which is a substantial amount of the population of New Mexico, which is just under 2 million. I think this resolution, by signing it and bringing it into fore and sending it to the Roundhouse, is going to have a real impact, because I think that Albuquerque and you folks are very well respected at the Roundhouse, as well as by several of the other municipalities across the state. And I think that you can perform a real key leadership role in trying to eliminate these coyote killing contests in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Hoover? Peggy Norton? Thank you. Okay, we are back on the bill. Councilor Benton?
I just want to thank the sponsors for bringing this forward. For me, it's always just a experience of amazement when I see a coyote in the city, and they're in the city. You know, they're. I think Corrales used to have a sign as you enter saying Corrales lives with coyotes, if I'm not mistaken. But we do. I mean, I live a block and a half from Central Avenue, and we saw a coyote running down the street. It's just it's an amazing, magical thing. I can't believe, I can't understand the desire to kill these animals. But anyway, I think all the good arguments have been made, but thanks for bringing this forward.
Let's go ahead and go to Councilor Borrego to close, and then Councilor Gibson.
I want to thank Councilor Gibson, actually, for sponsoring this bill. I mean, I jumped in sort of in the middle of it, and I will say that during my campaign, I was driving home one evening about 11 o'clock, and I ran into a white coyote, and that was kind of a sign that I needed to do something about this. And having grown up in northern New Mexico, you know, if there was an animal that was killed, it was killed because people were, you know, they needed to eat or they needed some sort of clothing, not for the sport. And so I think that all animals deserve respect, and I think that this is, you know, something that sends a message to the rest of the state, is that everyone and every living creature does deserve respect. So thank you.
Thank you.
For your support.
Councilor Gibson to close.
Thank you. The only thing that I want to add to this, and I was first of all, I need to thank so many people who are here this evening, and I think maybe a few people may have left, who provided a lot of the technical information on this. They were just really super to have on board, and thank you for allowing me to, and myself and Councilor Borrego sponsor this. But one thing that I did want to add, just for the record, is that neither this resolution or the bill that has been before the state legislature twice now intends to prohibit defending a person's livestock or domesticated animals against an attack by a coyote. So that's not what this says at all. This just takes a more humane approach to the contests, which are just very gruesome. You know, they offer, we had one not too long ago, a few months ago, offering a prize for not only the largest number of pelts brought in, but for the smallest as well as the largest. So it is pretty gruesome, and I would love to see that prohibited in the state of New Mexico. So anyway, I do urge your support on this. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second for approval of R-5. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. Those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. We are now under R-12. That's the final item on the agenda. Councilor Gibson.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. R-12 is supporting continued service by the New Mexico Rail Runner. And what this does is simply shows the support of this for the city of Albuquerque towards getting funding for the positive train control. This was an unfunded mandate that was put on railroads, that would help lessen the chances of accidents, of crashes on the rails. However, it's really, really expensive. $55 million. Oh, and there's Tom, and he can do such a better job at this than I can. Mr. Minicucci, could you do this?
Mr. Minicucci, go ahead and proceed.
Councilor Gibson, President Sanchez, councilors, just real quickly, as positive train control was required by the Federal Railroad Administration about 5 to 6 years ago, and through the urging of Congress, because of the number of deadly crashes in the United States that were occurring, what it does is it basically automates the traffic. It does a number of things, but it basically automates the system so that you can actually run a train almost without engineers. Most importantly is that it allows braking of a train by the signals if they notice that the train accidentally goes onto a track that's going to cause a head-on collision with another train, or if it's going to overcome a slower moving or stop train, it can stop that train even without the engineer's assistance. Like the councilor said, it's very expensive to do the rail runner line from Belen to Santa Fe is $55 million. The New Mexico Rio Metro has not had that funding to meet the 2018 deadline. However, they have now come up with a plan to do it by 2020. So what they would like, they're asking these set of resolutions to go forward from all their members so they can put it in the packet that they're going to send to the Federal Railroad Administration. That the Federal Railroad Administration has indicated they will accept to basically advocate that they will be able to fund the program by 2020. Also, it will go forward to the State Infrastructure Bank, where they are seeking a loan to help fund this program. So again, that's the purpose of the resolutions in the short.
I'd like to also ask the administration, Mr. Rael, who gave his heart and soul to the rail runner, to comment briefly on this bill.
Mr. President and members of the council, I think Tom pretty much described the bill. Urge your support.
Is that closing? Okay, we have a motion and a second on R-12. All those in favor signify by saying yes and raise your hand. Yes. Those opposed? That carries unanimously. And if there is no further business before this council, this meeting is adjourned.